Been a long time. Shouldn't have left you without a podcast to rep to. We're really out here, man. Really out here. Man, it's been almost 5 months since I dropped the episode, man. I know I went on a whole tour doing my rapper thing, you know what I'm saying, when I wasn't teaching. So I was rapping all summer. I'll still be doing a lot of rapping. Still about to do a little bit of rapping for the end of the year, but I've just been living life, taking in everything that's going on out here in the world, and finally came back with some good stuff to talk about. Really Out Your Podcast. My name is Marcel P. Black, the third episode of season 2. We're live with, man, one of the, it's very few, every person has a like maybe five, I'm gonna say five people in their lives outside of their parents that truly made an impact on their life. That if you did not meet this person, your life would be different. And the person I'm about to introduce to you is one of them. Poet, MC, husband, son, writer, organizer. Um, Pen game is different in any way you want to slice it. Um, you know, Pen game is different any way you want to slice it. Just an important person, a colossal person. You know what I'm saying? Um, like we this is my brother here. I'm the only child, and I don't call everybody my brother, but this person here, man, is just really, really important to me. Everybody out there in the Really Out Your podcast world, yes, say what's up to Mr. Donney Rose.
Whoa, whoa. Appreciate
Yeah,
you
I mean,
bringing me on, bro. I feel
absolutely,
like
man. Should have been done this. You know what I'm saying?
I feel like so I was watching Drink Champs the other day with Boosie on there, and like Nora and them were like, "This is our first podcast since we won the podcast of the year award, and Boosie is our guest." So I kind of feel like that, but a little bit more, a little bit more articulate and not with faith.
I was just watching that before I got on here. Just like
Was wild.
Boosie is admittedly, and like Boosie is my 100% biggest contradiction, biggest guilty pleasure. Um, is we will talk about this in a little bit too, as far as like we're the same age roughly as Boosie,
Hmm.
and like we're in Baton Rouge. My wife is in the background. Say hi.
That's cool. What up?
Hi. Ain't no editing too, so we keep it raw and real around here.
Hey, look, I'm
So
with it.
you know what I mean. But yeah, so yeah, we're gonna talk about Boosie in a second. But yeah, man, it's a pleasure to have you on, bro. Like it's just
Yeah.
the timing is right. A lot of things is going on, and just like everybody got a pod. Like it's funny because like I've been doing like video podcasts since like 2010 with the
Mm-hmm.
Black Thoughts thing when Ghost used to do them, and it's still on
Mm-hmm.
YouTube, right? 2010,
Mm-hmm.
we meet in front of my apartment complex. What time we shot an episode at the basketball court on Boulevard of Province. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
You know
Yeah,
what I'm
yeah.
saying? Like all over the place, right? Been shooting. So like now everybody got a podcast. You know what I mean? And it's like I don't listen to everything. You know what I'm saying? I listen to like a lot of political stuff, but like I don't believe in podcasting for the sake of podcasting. Like if
Right.
you look at the other 2 episodes I've done this year, with Dr. Side and Minister Server, it's been about very specific things that I wanted to talk about. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? And so I can do stuff every week if I wanted to, but it's important to like, when there's so much going on and there's oversaturation of content, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I believe in putting them something of substance, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, good to
Mm-hmm.
have you on.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so the first question I ask every single person is how did we meet? Do you remember how we met?
Yep, I remember exactly how we met. It was 2004, Smith and Brown Memorial Union on Southern University's campus. I was sitting in the McDonald's food court, eating some death, and you came up to me and was like, "Yo, I know you be doing shows. My name is, at the time you was like, my name is Outlaw, Marcel. I'm with a group called the Redland, and you were like, I know you be putting on shows. I'm wondering if my group could possibly come do a performance at one of your events. And I think I may have said at the time, that we had an event coming up, the listening lounge at the Red Star Bar downtown Baton Rouge. Y'all should just come through. Uh, maybe at the time I was like, come through, check out the open mic. But your band members, your group members were not living in Baton Rouge. They were in Atlanta, at school at Morehouse. Um, so maybe you came through the first time without them. Uh, because I remember you referencing that one of the first times you saw the artist we know as D1 was at that event, rapping, opening for a guy named Focus, Kirk Robinson. And so, um, I think a year later, we started building after that time, but I want to say a year later in 2005 was when I actually got around to featuring the Redland, at the listening lounge at the Red Star. And, we had already been building, chopping it up. And I remember at that event, Zero Skidmore was like, the big dude, he the one. Like, he's the one. And then, shortly thereafter, you went solo, and shortly thereafter, we became roommates, and history from there. So that's the story as I recall it.
Yeah, I mean, so that day, what happened was, I was going to some of the poetry reads on campus, and I would see you doing poetry. I'm like, man, that little dude nice. And I remember taking people with me, like, yo, watch that little dude, watch the little guy. You know what I'm saying? And because you're not tall, not because you're a little nigga, but
No, I
the
mean
small guy. You know what I mean?
it's
You know
what
what I'm
it
saying?
is.
Because you struck me because you know what I'm saying, you like 5'2", but you got a big voice. And I saw it where everybody respected, you know what I'm saying, your voice, whatever. And so I remember going to see you at was it 2003 or 4 Spring Bling? Was it
Yeah,
MTV Spring Bling? Was it BT or what was it?
it was
One of the
MTV.
Viacom motherfuckers, whatever.
Yeah, it was MTV
MTV,
and
whatever, was it Spring Bling? Whatever it was.
MTV Spring Break, something
Spring
like
Break or
that.
whatever. And you battled and like you mopped everybody. And I was telling people like, oh, he do poetry. I hear how he do poetry. Watch how he rap. I know he will be able to spit. And you mopped everybody, you won that. And I think like what made me come up to you that day in the union, because I was like, I didn't have a car, but like when I could get out, I was trying to get around. And what made me come up to you that day in the union was uh I went to the Soul Fusion that you had at Sogo Live. And this is the one, this is when Drunken Poet was the feature and he brought his daddy out, right?
Hmm.
But what got me was you had Jimmy Jump
But
do like, because you had a closed mic. Matter of fact, Steve Bayham just posted the flyer for it recently. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah,
I just
yeah,
saw the flyer. I was at that. And I was like, oh well,
yeah,
he do put on rappers. And so I was
yeah.
like, okay. So one day I saw you in the union, and you know what I'm saying, I walked up, and I think I gave you a CD and a business card, because that's what I used to have. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? And then we like ciphered like back and forth, like some true rabbity rap shit. You know what I'm saying? But yeah,
Sounds
and
all
like I
right.
said, from there, I started coming to the poetry readings, and I'm sure I know we ciphered outside the poetry readings, and then we just got closer and closer, became co-workers, roommates, and just you know drinking partners. Uh, pulled over together. The one the one charge I've ever caught
Yeah, and
was
I mean, yeah, and let's not forget there was the era of Soul by the Man, you promoting, helping promote shows,
business
the
partners,
creation of the listening lounge,
facilitators,
all kind of stuff. You know what I
like
mean?
literally strong, like real friendship, real brotherhood, real family. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, man. So we really know each other. For the people, I mean, if you know us, you know each other. But for the people who don't, we go back damn near 20 years at this point.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right, so look, let's get into it, man. So, got some questions here. Um, what were some of your earliest memories of experiencing hip hop? And second part of that question, what was it like growing up in South Louisiana with the emerging New Orleans and Baton Rouge rap scenes?
So the first part, so I'm the youngest of three children. I have two older brothers, and each of my older brothers we're all 5 years apart. So my second older brother is 5 years older than me. My oldest brother is 10 years older than me, and so I grew up. My oldest brother was born in 1970. Second older brother born in 1975. Me 1980. So grew up in the we grew up with hip hop in the emergence of the music and the emergence of the culture, and so because I had older brothers, like they were listening to, rap pretty much at its origin, buying tapes. But yeah, that's what people were buying cassette tapes. Like it wasn't like, at that point, vinyl was made a comeback now, but vinyl was like not a thing then. People were buying cassette tapes, so this was pre CDs. And so I remember, my brothers listening to LL Cool J, Run DMC, uh, Too Short. It was a bunch of folks that they were influenced by. One of my earliest memories, and I was talking to my wife about this the other day. I got my brother tape taken from him because he had LL Cool J, and I'm listening to I'm Bad, and I might have been like 5 or 6 years old, and I'm rapping I'm Bad, and LL's like, and I ain't met a mother who could do that. Like I said that, right?
Mhm.
And my mama heard me like, what? And I was like, I don't know. So she ended up taking his tape. So you mad. Um, so then this is also the era of Yo MTV Raps coming into effect. Later on, Rap City coming into effect, and so and this kind of like leads into the second part of your question. Um, in the earliest eras of rap, there was basically no real Southern representation at the mainstream. I think that the closest we had to the earliest my memory was like MC Shy D from Atlanta and Two Live Crew out of Florida. And so in Baton Rouge and in New Orleans, folks were not really beginning to identify themselves as rappers until at the earliest, maybe 1989, but definitely like around 1991. So in Baton Rouge, the first person I knew to identify himself as a rapper was the late MC Nero. Um, in
Who's
New
that
Orleans,
Nero?
yeah, yeah, got a lot of respect. You know what I mean? That was a Nero. Crazy man. You know what it is. Uh, in New Orleans, it was T. Tucker, Gregory D. Manny Fresh, right? And so these were like the earliest iterations of rap that I knew of in Baton Rouge and in New Orleans. In New Orleans, it very much was, the emergence of bounce music, chant heavy music. We didn't get to the No Limits of the world, the Cash Monies of the world until like deep into the mid '90s. But in the early '80s, I mean, not the late '80s, early '90s, it was bounce music. You know what I mean? It was T. Tucker, it was Manny Fresh, it was Gregory D, it was DJ Jimmy. You know what I mean? And in Baton Rouge again, for a good minute, the only person that was really holding that mantle was Nero. Um, Now, by the time you get to the mid '90s in Baton Rouge, you get, from what I remember, was the emergence of the concentration camp, which was, CeeLo, Max Minnelli, Javon, a little unknown rapper by the name of Lil Boosie at the time. And so they really like took Baton Rouge by storm in the mid to late '90s, which also coincided with the same time of the emergence of No Limit, who really kind of popped in the mid around '94ish, and then later Cash Money. The difference being No Limit um, and Cash Money acquired major label deals, whereas the rappers in Baton Rouge, the concentration camp, um, and later on, which would, folks like Trill and, Dead Game, all that, like they were behind the curve with respect to getting a major label deal. So people were not looking at Baton Rouge rap for on a national level for, I would say, if you count that hip hop really began on a mainstream level in '79, when I talk about the entrance of the culture, the entrance of the culture. So the
Mhm.
culture we know began in '73. But if you're looking at if you use the timeline of 1979, Sugar Hill Gang, right? By the time Baton Rouge was on the map, mainstream, 21 years had gone by, right? So we were very deep into like a few eras of hip hop by the time Baton Rouge got like this major look. And so people may look at someone like NBA YoungBoy now and are like, this is like one of the more well-known rappers in the game or what have you, and him coming from Baton Rouge. But Baton Rouge did not have a national look for like well over 20 years.
Right. I remember I remember hearing about the camp because you know how you do that was real big. people, my older cousin loved Bleed. You know what I'm saying? And so that was my introduction to the
Yeah.
camp. And he loved Bleed. He was a Bleed disciple because he was all more rock with No Limit, real tough. So anything No
Yeah.
Limit was coming out, but like everybody knew that like, okay, this is different from everything else going on in No Limit. You know what I'm saying? So my cousin would Bleed real tough, and then through Bleed, that's how I started hearing about Loke and the camp and that little squeaky little kid named Boosie. You know what I'm saying? And I hated it at first. I hated it. I was like, yo, what is this? I was straight backpacker. You know what I'm saying? And it was just so different. Um, and then like ironically, I ended up moving to Baton Rouge, and um, like especially with me being here in Oklahoma now, in Tulsa now, like I came to Louisiana in 2002 when bounce music was going national. Like, cause I remember right before I got there, Rock the Boat, the Master P version of Rock the Boat was on 106 apart. Chopper Style was on 106 apart. You know what I'm saying? And if you remember that summer, I mean that 2002, the line dances was real crazy that year. That's when the Hot Boy
Mm-hmm.
Ronald and stuff dropped. You know what I'm saying? So that was real big. And so I
Mm-hmm.
came I came to I came to Louisiana. Bounce music was king. Jig hadn't taken over just yet, but Bucked Up and Fucked Up was the anthem to the streets. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
that's what the Baton Rouge streets was on. And so to like be in
Mm-hmm.
Baton Rouge and like me being just right about a less than a year younger than Boosie, kind of growing up with that. Like that's my era of Baton Rouge. You know what I'm saying? From my thugs era up until, you know what I'm saying, I lived in 19 or what have you. And just watching how much music
Mm-hmm.
changed even then. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean it's been it's really interesting. Like I don't know if you got a chance to do it, but if you get time, go to Audible and listen to the Boosie's his memoir. And
Yeah, no, yeah,
it's I
100%.
mean it's a you'll appreciate it more as a native because you're from Baton Rouge. I really appreciate it as a transplant who spent most of his adult life in Baton Rouge. But it really does tell a real Baton Rouge story. And I and that's what's so conflicting about Boosie to me because he's a terrible person. Um, and he says all these type of different things I can't get behind, but he's so charismatic, and he tells what being poor and black in Baton Rouge is to a T with the level of authenticity and genuineness that it just catches me every time. And
Yeah, that's
that's the
my
reason why
thing.
that nigga's my
Yeah,
guilty pleasure, because
yeah,
I
yeah.
get it, I understand it. Like I was telling my wife the other day, we was watching some of the Drink Champs episode, and I asked my wife, I said, how many boosters have you taught? She was like, shit, that's all I taught. You know what I'm saying? Like in these charter schools, man, and as a counselor, when I'm working at AMI, I've taught so many of these people. And maybe that's the reason why, like, I have I can say a soft spot for him, but I just have an understanding of what he's talking about. But anyways, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, no. He's when I was just watching him on Dream Champs the other day, like just listening to his cadence and his playing and how like this guy, and he's been living in Atlanta for a long time, right? And he talks about that, but this guy is so undeniably Baton Rouge. Like you listen to him talk, but more than that, when you listen to the way he reasons and rationalizes things, like, we've used the phrase Baton Rouge nigga thinking, like that is really that. You know what I mean? And it's something to where either you're from there or you spent considerable time, like you, to where that, like, only then does that make sense. I'm not saying that a lot of problematic stuff that he says makes sense or that I condone it. I absolutely don't. But I know the rationale from which he speaks in a lot of ways, even if I don't agree with it. Like,
Facts, fact,
yeah,
and like I said, I think that's the damn it. That's the contradicting thing about it. It's like, man, this is awful, but it's just like, I mean, I don't know. I mean,
yeah,
anyways, let's so on the opposite end of the spectrum from Boosie.
yeah. Hmm.
Growing up, were there any hip hop artists that influenced you in terms of politics or social consciousness? Now, I know that, like, a lot of times, what I'm saying, poets, what I'm saying, there's a lot of politics stuff and socio-political stuff into it. And then, like, poets, and then the neo soul was coming out and conscious rap was coming, whatever, you know what I'm saying? But like,
Yeah.
like whatever, like, who are some of the artists that kind of like that you listen to and it kind of made you and give you that level of awareness?
Yeah, I think for me, it wasn't necessarily the kind of, I guess, traditional route. When I was a very, much younger child, again, because I had older brothers that were listening to things. Of course, I was exposed to Public Enemy, X Clan, Poor Righteous Teachers, or whatever. But I'm like 8, 9, 10 years old, right? So like I see the animated Flavor Flav doing 911 as a joke, and I'm like, this guy is wild, right? But it's not until I'm much older till I understand like the context of what 911 as a joke is even trying to tell me, right? I see Fight the Power, and I'm like, okay, cool. Like they're out marching on the streets of New York City, and you see all these signs, and you see images of Malcolm X, and Chuck D, talking about, how Elvis was a hero the most, but it doesn't mean shit to me. And again, like I can feel the pulsating aggression in the language, but I can't really conceptualize it, right? So I think when I say like in a non-conventional way, um, I remember very early on knowing the lyrics to like NWA's Straight Outta Compton album. Again, I'm like 8 years old, right? And maybe I'm drawn to it because it's so vulgar, but also there was something about them saying fuck the police that even as a young child, like this aggression is coming from somewhere.
Hmm.
I may not have been able to wrap my, but I'm like, there's a reason why Ice Cube is so mad, why MC Ren is so mad, right? And I think that as time went on, um, even when you look at for me, I was not necessarily the biggest fan of quote unquote backpack conscious hip hop, right? I liked certain folks, but I definitely listened to way more gangster rap than anything else, right? And so for me, what it always was kind of about was like I was finding I guess the nuggets of realism beyond the gangster bravado or beyond the materialism, right? So I was able to find nuggets of truth telling from Nas, from Jay, from Scarface, from Pac, you know what I mean, from Big, right? Because all of these artists had that. They may not have like foregrounded that, but they always had that. You know what I mean? And so I think, and also just to be honest, like at this around this time, when I was a teenager in high school, this also kind of coincides with major labels investing in private prisons and things of this nature, right? And so there's a higher level of publicity for gangster, mafioso, materialism type rap. So because I'm more inundated with that, I'm listening to that more. But again, the difference is if I listen to Reasonable Doubt, there are nuggets that Jay Z is dropping in Reasonable Doubt, even amid talking about dope dealing, right? There are countless nuggets that Nas is dropping in Illmatic about growing up, what I mean, socioeconomically depraved in New York City, right? Amid, I'm the addict for sneakers, 20s of Buddha, and bitches with big, like all of that is there, right? Scarface, as a Southerner, always gave us that, right?
It's very he was overtly political. Like, yeah.
And so, you know, I think that when it comes to, I guess, like the more traditional conscious MCs, I was into Black Star when they came out. I was into Common, Retrospect for Life, and a lot of his projects even before, like, I guess he really popped off with B, and at that point he's like 6 albums in. But I was into Common. One day it'll all make sense, like Water for Chocolate, what have you. So I was definitely, like I said, I had a taste for the more traditional conscious MCs, but to a certain extent, like I found some of that music boring. You know what I mean? Like I was excited by um some of the more aggressive, you know, music. And then again, coming up in Baton Rouge, like once the concentration camp really became a thing, and listening to Loke, Bleed, Javon, Max Manelli, Boosie, I'm like, I may not live this lifestyle, but I completely understand what they are saying. You know what I mean? I'm not out here busting guns, selling crack, but the socio-political conditions that they are like that's undergirding this, I live this, right? Growing up in North Baton Rouge in Scotlandville, which is just the opposite side of town where those dudes were from, it's the same goddamn situation. It's like it's the same conditions, right? And so, I think that, and I think about this often, and not to, not to just, ramble on this point.
Nah,
But I
man,
think
look,
about this,
man, come on, man. You know your words is important, bro.
you
Talk
know,
about
what
it.
I think about often is like even in the early era of like No Limit or the early era concentration camp, Cash Money or whatever, one thing that they did a lot, which I don't really hear a lot of rappers talking about now, like and especially Master P, they would condone white folks on records a lot. You know what I mean? Like P, like, I'm not running
Condemn.
from the motherfucking white folks. Like
Yeah.
they would name that. You know what I mean? Mia X and them, they would name white supremacy by not, but they wouldn't call it white supremacy, right? But they would name the conditions of like this is the shit that we're dealing with at the behest of white folks. Now, yeah, they would talk about hating ass niggas and busting heads and all that. But I think that because of the time they were coming up and where they were coming up, they had this context. You know what I mean? Of like, in this ways, whiteness is impacting my way of life, what I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to accomplish, and they would articulate that in their own, Calio third world Magnolia ways. And the same shit in Baton Rouge. You know what I mean? Like you would hear, you know, Loke, Boosie, Max talk about, having an adversarial relationship with police. Of course they're talking about Baton Rouge police, right? Um, or having to navigate, what I mean, certain racisms in town. You know what I mean? Like this was always a part of that music. And I think that, when you talk about artists from the South in general, especially in, the 90s, probably bleeding into the early 2000s, like there was a lot of that. You know what I mean? And they weren't necessarily quote unquote conscious or political rappers. They just were talking about dealing with systemic racism and inequity through a lens that was most familiar to them.
I think as far as like P and them, right? We're talking about some of these dudes born in the '60s, right? And
Right. Yeah.
I think they came up probably watching the black exploitation films that their parents had. And in every
Mm-hmm.
black exploitation, it could be about hardcore pimping or whatever. There was some cracker ass white man, like they would call them
Yeah.
hocus crackers. That was
Right.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
they would talk about these government plots, because while this is going
Mm-hmm.
on, you also got the politics from the Black Panther Party seeping through, and you
Mm-hmm.
see a bits and piece of it in black exploitation. And so if you
Yep.
grew up in, people born in like '65, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying. So if you're growing up in that era, you seeing this, and the same thing. It's like I think like the '90s is really when hip hop really, the late '90s, and because of people like Master P and Baby, is when specifically Southern rap really started cashing out. You know what I'm saying? Pun intended, right? And I think like now a lot of what is like mainstream, like if you look at what P and them was doing, and even P and them was doing, that was indigenous Louisiana rap, right? But it was mainstream because it was all over the world. But they were talking about third world New Orleans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like what we consider mainstream rap. 90% of it is a strictly commercial product with no real ties to anything tangible.
Right.
And it's like,
Yeah.
and a lot of these dudes are not street dudes, right? And so we know this, man, being around the big homies, dudes in the streets, me growing up around like Crips and Bloods. Like the real old heads are trying to keep the young boys from doing the dumb shit. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And they would talk about how the white folks would do you. They like, you know what I'm saying? And if you look, it's in the rap. Like you said, P, I would argue 15 to 20% of every No Limit album was social commentary. Now a lot of it's steeped in specifically black capitalism or whatever, but they would talk about the government, they would talk about this, they would talk about after all the you get nothing but dope dealing, guns, buses, hoes shaking ass and dope, whatever. But you will have at least two strong records. It's gonna be somebody dead homie, how we need to stop the killing. It's gonna be about how we need to, build up our community, or it's gonna be a admonishment of the system. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And
Yeah.
I think because That's how real dudes from the streets was. You know what I'm saying? Like the
Right.
people who come from the era, they had just a tiny bit of that, consciousness that was still came from the Black Power era, in which some of them was born in. You know what I'm saying? Or the tail end of it, or what have you. And especially like if you like a teenager in the 80s, it's evident what the government is doing to you and your community. Like it's outside with crack and gangs and all these other different things. And this is when the second iteration of the war on drugs really popped off in mass incarceration. So you're really dealing with being young and black in that era. You are literally being attacked by the government. And it was reflected in the music. And I think that's what's really missing now, you know, because these are just kids who have computers and phones and they just say whatever. Like I say it on project I'm working on. I was like, these crackers really try to give a bag to a robot.
Mm-hmm.
It don't
Mm-hmm.
matter if in Mecca a little tech to have you selling talking records or sell a couple records. Like they was literally about that they did give a bag and people complained that the white robot was saying nigga, they took the bag back. Right? So it's like all of this music, and people talk about like FM Mecca, he's just a robot version of what Lil Tecca is. All these dudes who are not about nothing, it's almost like AI. Hey, you take this melody, you take this hook, you use this thing, and none of it's connected to real life. You know what I'm
Yeah, I
saying?
don't. Yeah, you don't. You don't even get to a FN Mecca without the success of Takashi 6ix9ine.
Facts, facts.
You
He
know
was a
what I
robot
mean?
version of that shit, right?
Right. So I mean, down to the way he looked, right? Um. So yeah, and I hate to like get on. I hate to like kind of be on any type of old head type tangent, right? Of like when my day was blah blah blah. Because I mean, my era, my generation of rap birthed the children who are doing what they're doing now, right? My generation of dope dealing rappers birthed a generation of drug addicted rappers, right? So they are in many ways culpable. I think the difference is the industry at the time had more allowance for this balance. You know what I mean? And I don't mean balance from different type of artists. I mean balance within a record, right? So I can listen to Ghetto D, right? One of the first song on Ghetto D, Master P, 1997 Ghetto D, Make Crack Like This. The very first song, the very first verse, C Murder gives a tutorial on how to make crack cocaine. Step one through step whatever, right? But in the same song, I believe, P says something basically about, watching out for them people. You know what I mean? And he's saying it from a standpoint, and it's such a damn contradiction, right? Because on one hand, you and your brother are talking about this is how I this is how I make crack cocaine to distribute to our community, right? To decimate our area. But at the same time, be mindful of those people. They may be trying to set you up, they may be trying to trap you. Now, what he's talking about is, shit like stop and frisk. What he's talking about is shit like broken window policies. What he's talking about is shit like entrapment, right? Now, one could argue, nigga, you actually are committing a crime, right? You're engaging in criminal activity, right? And you're admitting that. But at the same time, it's like there was still this degree of balance of let me get off this socio-political message. Even, it's kind of like hiding the candy in the medicine, right? Whereas now, I feel like rap has gotten so polarized and it's so extreme to where like if you're going to get socio-political content for the most part, you're going to get that specifically from certain artists, and everybody else is going to give you 100% foolishness with no redeeming nothing. It's just
Right.
all the way foolish, right? Um, Unless you're talking, and let me take that back because I think that it also depends on the age of the artist, right? So if I look at Freddie Gibbs and if I look at Benny the Butcher, coincidentally, two people who are at odds with each other, right? These dudes have been in the game for a while. Gibbs been in the game for a little over 10 years. Benny been, here for a while. But they both emerged in their late 30s. And so when you listen to a Gibbs record or a Benny record, you're going to hear some shit beneath all of the, dope dealing and murder and mayhem. Like you're going to hear some semblance of social commentary, but that's because it's coming from 37 and 38-year-old rappers that just got popular, right? That just blew up in a mainstream way post age 34 or 35, right? But they came up on the Face, the introspective J, the Nas. So that's in their DNA. So when they rap about that in 2022, it's like, oh, we can tell these guys are they're of an age in which they came up where there was some kind of degree of balance. Um, Whereas, a lot of these, younger guys who may have, made their way via the internet or via social media, they're just like, shit, I'm about to go all the way 100% foolish. Like that's it. I ain't got nothing else.
But you can tell who grew up like you could tell you could tell like the difference between a rapper who grew up listening to Pac or who didn't.
Nah, yeah, nah.
You know what I'm saying? Like for real,
Yeah.
like I'm probably more of a bigger fan of Pac, his legacy and what he meant than I am his music. Admittedly, I don't listen to a whole lot of Tupac music, but I appreciate it on a
Mm-hmm.
different level after I kind of like really understood his life and like read his FBI files. But I understand like for our era, Pac was the epitome of a real nigga. You know what I'm saying? And
Mm-hmm.
there's certain things, it's just
Yeah.
like even me myself is just like, yo, like Pac would put up with this clown ass shit. You know, like you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Pac, like Pac, like there was a video where he was on Teen Summit and Pac was licking shots at MC Hammer. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
it was crazy. Hammer was really about that in the streets. But like he was like, yo, this dude is
Yeah.
a coon. Like, but I don't know. So it's just like stuff I see, but like, yo, Pac, whatever. I don't know. But
Yeah. But
it's so
also,
different. It's just so different now, man. And I think like um man, social media is a motherfucker. And I think and I say that as a teacher. I say that as a teacher. Like because I'm with these kids and like they can't have a I don't expect, you know what I'm saying, 13 to 14 year olds to have conversations, on the level of Aristotle and Confucius. But the things they talk about, everything is so topically, it's so provocative and it's like all real edgy because that's all they see. You know what I'm saying?
mm,
Like nobody's like when they talk on their own, it's something almost slightly inappropriate. It's provocative. It's something designed to get people to say ooh and ah and to get attention because they're growing up in this viral era, in this content influencer era that's designed to make you uncomfortable or get clout or what have you. And so that's the way that they talk.
mm,
And so that's how the music is. Like I know like my nephew stayed with us a couple summers ago and he said the only way he hears about new rap is what goes viral. Like he doesn't have his own palette to like what he really likes on his own. Like whatever
mm,
goes viral on TikTok or Snapchat or whatever Instagram, that's what he's into. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, so I think like a lot of what we hear now, like I said, it's literally all AI. It's all based on, you know what I'm saying? Like the 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 industry is paying attention, people are responding to, and they're finding artists to make that over and over and over and over. And so it
yeah.
totally alleviates anything that could be of substance, unless you're like Kendrick Lamar. You have to be that big. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And even and one can argue then, like if you're really on some like radical left shit, we can argue the effectiveness of what Kendrick does, you know what I'm saying, in terms of social commentary when you mix it with some of the other messages in his music. I mean that's an argument to be had, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But I think that even when you're talking about someone like Kendrick, you got to look at the point at which he emerged, and you got to look at the cutoff point, right? So Kendrick emerged in the public consciousness around 2011, right? So you got to look at how much social media has changed even since that time. You know what I mean? Um, some of the people, whether you're talking Kendrick, whether you're talking Nipsey, even there's a lot of people who would be considered Cole, whomever, who would be considered, this generation or whatever generation rap, these guys made their way into the public consciousness around the early 2010s. And by the time you get to 2020, social media doesn't even look the same, right?
Facts.
By the time you get to 2020, you know, artists who emerged during the era of social networking ain't the same as the artists who emerged through the era of social media.
Social media. Yep.
So it's not even packaged the same way, right? And so with that being the case, like yeah, you are dealing with higher levels of extremism, higher levels of just sensationalism. I mean, Freddie Gibbs on his new album, he has the song CIA Crack
Crack
Instagram and
Instagram
AIDS.
and AIDS. Yep.
And I'm like, that shit is low key genius. When he's like, the government, gave us crack Instagram and AIDS. And like, of course, the crack and AIDS part, we already understood, right? But just kind of like thinking about Instagram or social media as a means of, infiltrating the minds of impressionable young black people. Like, we are of the first generation, of social media users because we were already adults and social media was a thing, which is different than you got kids now that have grown up like your children or have Instagram accounts, right? Think about that. You have a child that was born in 2010 that has an Instagram account. So what does that mean? That means that she's grown up her whole life with Instagram as a thing, to the point that when she reached up a certain age, you and your wife are like, you can have your own account. That's not the same as, those of us that walk into it as adults. So, and you see this in the classroom, you're dealing with young people who that's all they've grown up with. And as social networking evolved into social media and as things became more sensationalized and brief, because brevity has something to do with it as well. As things became like we gotta like have quick attention grabbing things, such as TikTok, you get this high level of just like extreme, just extremity. Whether you're talking violence, whether you're talking, sexuality, whatever you're talking, you're getting it in extreme short doses. And I think what happens is when a kid sees something now that's just so exaggerated in such a very short dose, if there's no one at home to contextualize what you're looking at, then you're just like, that's what I got to do. That's what I got to be. If I'm going to go viral, if my shit going to pop, I need to do these things. You know what I mean? And I need to do them in short increments. You know what I mean? I might be 15 with a 30-second twerking video, or I might be 17 with a video with me holding, an AR-15. But I gotta like put that shit out there so I can get that clout. You know what I mean? When I was watching the Drink Champs episode with Boosie and Noriega, they're talking about just the era of social media and how people are doing things for clout. And Boosie said something of note. He's like, rappers are killing other rappers for clout. That's the thing. You know what I mean? People are knocking people's heads off so they can go to social media and be like, incriminate themselves, but be like, I knocked that nigga head off. I told
That
him
that
I'll do
that,
it, and I did.
that's what really tripped me out about when Triple X Tentacion got killed. Like I'm gonna say this. Like I said it years ago. He did several things that should have got his ass killed.
Hmm.
From raping people's daughters to beating up gay dudes in prison to some he did a lot of shit and said a lot of shit that me as a father or a protector of anybody who I love, if I'd have seen him, I'd have down batted him. You know what I'm saying? Like it would have been it would have been no conversation. But the way he died was tragic because it was a result of the toxicity that is Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat and TikTok. Well, not TikTok so much, just the social media clout. Like somebody killed him on Instagram Live.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? While he was in his car. Like he wasn't doing anything that warranted being murdered. They did it for clout.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so while, you know, I never got into his music, because I saw how terrible of a person he was. He should have just went to jail and it's always there in court for the things he did to hurt people. You know what I'm saying? Or got stolen on some more concerts. Anyways, he was talking about orally raping people's 12-year-old sisters. And so when he came to their hometown, they came and saw his ass. And I'm with that. I'm with good principled violence in hip hop. I'm with that. There's still some of this toxic masculinity I'm trying to unlearn. But from the Will Smith slap to the Draymond punch, I'm with some good principled. To the KRS One, throw a nigga off the stage, I'm with good principled hip hop, violence. But anyway, all that to say. But yeah, so that really bothered me, this whole clout thing. And that's the reason why, like, I'm no fan of influencers. I really try not to use the word content because content is a commodity. And a lot of times these commodities do nothing to serve me and my people. And so I used to call it art and culture, but it's too long to say. So now I approach it as making sure I'm putting out substance, something that means something. Whatever I put out there into the world. But so I want to transition on to this next thing. So your answer, I wouldn't expect you to give the answer you gave. I understand it. So would you say, I know for me, my parents were not political. They were not like as quote unquote, nationalist and black as I am. My parents weren't that. You know what I'm saying? So I can honestly say that, like, the origins of me getting my politics and my pro-black standards came from hip hop. And that's not. It seems like that's not what I got from you. That wasn't what kind of got you into it. So let me ask you this: outside of hip hop, who has been some of your socio-political influences as a writer and a thinker, and like how did you access this information? So, I know we're in the era of articles. I remember when we lived together, used to read a lot. You know what I'm saying? Like, so like, who were some of these people who, like, the person who you are now, like outside of hip hop, who kind of planted these seeds to become the thinker and the person that you are?
I mean, I would say really, and again, in full transparency, for me, I want to say it began through my journey with performance poetry, right? Going to poetry readings back on the campus, and then going out to like the adult open mics. And so, when I first started performing poetry, I was a bit of a knucklehead, with respect to content, right? Um, like I was trying to be, lyrical, with my shit, or sensational, sensationalized, or comical, or whatever. So I was a knucklehead with mine. But early on, I saw folks like Mona Webb, um, uh, the SGA president back when I was first on the yard, Jessica Pulliam, was a very deep, conscientious sister and also like poet, right? Folks like that, folks like my man Jamal, IMC, uh, it's a bunch of folks, right? And I would go as a very young person, 19, 20 years old, to club culture, to the open mic, and I would see, a bunch of, folks with locks and, you know, um, kind of African garb, or, rocking the incense or whatever like that. And they were writing about and talking about things of kind of a heightened level of consciousness. A lot of these people are now what we may describe as hoteps. You know what I mean? and just being real, right?
Man,
And,
everybody got the hotel phase, man. Like,
right, and some of
I
the
used to fool Umar at one point. You know what I mean?
right, and some of these folks, really, really espoused, what I mean, hotep ideals, right? But a lot of it was also rooted in this thing of like deeper and elevated consciousness. So even in the midst of my own knuckleheadedness, my own misogyny, my own whatever, like those things were being like planted in me because I was in community with those people on a regular basis, right? And so what happens is that, I got introduced to a lot of poetic elders by way of my peers. So, you know, I learned about the work of Sonia Sanchez and Nikki Giovanni and, Abigail Doon, Oyelaway, and the last book through my peers. Like, it wasn't really necessarily through my own curiosity, right? And so then I think what happened was I got more of an understanding that what I was participating in, the art form I was participating in, had a lineage that was rooted in Black advocacy and Black activism, right? So that before we talk about, or not before, but post, the Harlem Renaissance, you got the Black Arts Movement or whatever. So I'm learning more and more about the genre I'm participating in and the responsibility that the artists that participated in had, right? Which again was something I was either not necessarily getting from rap or I wasn't like looking for it in rap. Um, and so, it just kind of was a matriculation over time, being in community with conscious minded people. Now, of course, what consciousness looked like shifted as time evolved. So for me, in the early days of going to poetry readings, consciousness looked like Pan Africanism, right? But it also looked like homophobia. Well, not consciousness, there was also homophobia, right? So as the years went on, I am making distinctions between these are like the good things I may have been able to take from my folks preaching Pan Africanism, but this is the thing I'm trying to like extract, right? So how can I keep this and extract the homophobia? How can I keep this and extract the misogyny? How can I keep this and extract the transphobia? And again, this also comes with community and who you're around. So by the time my Baton Rouge ass got out to a national poetry slam event, I'm seeing people from all different walks of life around the country. People of color who may be trans, who may be gender nonconforming, who may be bi, who may be atheist, who may be agnostic. I'm getting this range of different type of people, but probably more specifically this range of different type of Black people that I wasn't getting in the Deep South. I wasn't seeing in the Deep South, right? So of course, I think that community impacts your perspective. I think it's hard to be in community with different types of people and just be like, I'm just gonna stay the same nigga, right? Like, I'm not gonna change. Like nothing about me is going to change. Um, and so I think that during the mid to late 2000s, I was finding myself in different packets of evolution based on who I was around. But in another, to be transparent again, like there was not a public facing narrative about, I guess, I ain't gonna say the value of Black lives or the amplification of such, right? Um, we know that in 2008, Sean Bell was killed before, his wedding. We know in 2009 going to 2010, Oscar Grant was killed on a cart, right? But this is when we just get to the age of um, Black folks being violently decimated at the hands of the state makes its way to like social media or makes its way to recording. So by the time 2012 rolls around and Trayvon Martin happens, you know, for me, just like for a lot of other people, we started saying, and I think, well, for me, I was like, I could talk about all these issues or whatever, but there's a war going on in my backyard that I need to be a little bit more locked into. I need to be reading more about, I need to be talking more about, I need to be writing more about. And so, but what I will also say with that, I think what it did was unearth some stuff that was always there, right? You may have heard me say this, like I remember my mother used to say, when Black people sleeping, white folks are up plotting, right? And my mom wasn't necessarily a conscious person, right? But that was just something that was in her language. Or my dad used to say things that were, conscientious while not being a quote unquote conscious person. And so at a point where certain things just kind of started coming to the forefront, it unlocked some stuff that was already there. And I'm like, I can get on this mic and I can like advocate for everyone else or whatever like that, or I can really like tune into what's going on with my folks. And then beyond just terror or beyond just mayhem, let's tell a fuller story about Blackness and what Black people are. And from a writing standpoint, I was like, if I never write another piece that is quote unquote universal or that appeals to everyone else. If I just dealt with the spectrum of blackness or black folks, like I could have a wealth of, material into the rest of my life. And so, I'm not necessarily sure if that answers your question,
No.
but I think, for me, I've always been a communal learner. You know what I'm saying? Like I've always been a person like I learn based on people I'm around. And, and then from there, they may influence me to do a deeper dive. You know what I mean? To look into something beyond just what we're talking about. So yeah, what I wasn't getting from rap, I was definitely getting from, you know, I don't know, early 2000 era hoteps, at the poetry. And it just kind of like grew, it just kind of evolved from there.
As a writer, as a thinker, as an organizer, as a planner, can you tell me how the summer of 2016 changed everything for you?
Man, hope we got time. So,
As long as we want to go,
um,
bro.
okay. So at that point, um, I had already began doing a lot of, I was writing a lot on social media just about issues of race and culture, particularly around the movement for Black Lives and particularly around instances of police violence, right? But for me, I felt like even everything I was doing up to that point was like theoretical. You know what I'm saying? So if I'm talking about Sandra Bland, if I'm talking about Freddie Gray, if I'm talking about, Walter Scott, if I'm talking about Tamir Rice, if I'm talking about Eric Garner, all of this for me exists in theory. Like I see it happen, but the shit hit different, right? And you know this. When Alton Sterling was killed, he was killed literally 2 blocks from where we used to work at an after school program for young people. I think for me, it got real in a different way when one of our mentees, DeAndre, said, I knew Mr. Alton. I used to see him all the time outside of Triple S selling CDs, right? So what grew into this worldwide story had roots literally in my backyard, all right? And so what happened at that time was my inbox on Facebook became like a marathon. And people, it was either family members from different parts of the country or really just Texas. If my family lives in Louisiana or Texas, right? Family members from elsewhere, or maybe poet friends or comrades from different parts. People were either checking on how I was doing, asking about information on the ground, or there was some occasional trolling, right? So what that summer did was really like put a very real visceral face on everything that I was talking about. You know what I mean? I never forget that, I want to say it was July July 10th. It was July 10th, 2016. Young people in Baton Rouge, organization called The Wave, organized the biggest rally, right? There were little rallies up to that point, but The Wave had this big multicultural rally for Alton Sterling, where these young people went to the steps of the state capitol and basically was like, we about to, we about to, these are our demands, right? These are the things that we need from law enforcement and whatnot. And it was this beautiful sea of people, right? It was like maybe 5,000 people out there, literally, right? The thing ends, and after that, the group I was working for at the time, Forward Arts, our young people did like a post poetry event like after that rally at the Arts Council. All of this is in downtown Baton Rouge. At the point, I'm living in Beauregard Town, which is like another corridor of downtown Baton Rouge. I go home. No, what happened? So I leave the rally and I'm going uh I'm going home to like get some stuff and come back downtown for this event. So while I'm at the event, the street I lived on in Baton Rouge, East Boulevard, goes completely apeshit. Police come down my narrow street in tanks and military tanks. They're going on yards. They're throwing people out of their yard. My 2 cats are at home wilding out, screaming because it's sirens. Like is just wild, right? I'm at the arts council. My wife Leslie's at home, and she's like telling me, texting me like, you need to be really, really careful on your way back home because this is mayhem out here, right? And what I'm talking about can be found, if you Google search 2016 Baton Rouge, like there's a BBC clip of the scene that I'm describing right now, right? Of police on East Boulevard, like in tanks and pulling people out. A friend of mine, Lisa, you
Lisa
know,
Swiller.
yeah, Lisa Swilly, people ran up in her house. All she was doing was providing refuge for protesters. They ran up in her house, took people off. You know what I mean? And so for me, what was so wild was literally a day later. It's like none of the shit happened. The street was back to what it was, right? But that's it in my memory. And I think furthermore, what I was experiencing at that time, as well as a lot of other folks, particularly folks who were kind of vocal in public, was like this kind of paranoia. You know what I mean? You're driving and you're concerned about being pulled over and someone recognizing who you might be. You know what I'm saying? Like I remember coming across a police officer and the fucking cop called me by my name. I never met this person before in my life, right? So this kind of what the climate was. You know what I mean? Like um Alton Sterling, and we came to learn things about Alton later on that were definitely difficult to process, right? But at the core of what we knew was that here was someone that was doing what they normally did, selling CDs, um, had a weapon on him or whatever, based on being, I think, robbed a few weeks prior, or almost or attempted robbery a few weeks prior. He's out in the most dangerous zip code in the city, selling CDs in the middle of the night. Someone calls the police, says that he threatened them. Who knows if this happens or whatnot. Blaine Solomon and Howie Lake come up on the scene. Blaine Solomon step on the scene like, I will shoot your fucking head off, bitch, within 3 seconds of arrival. Within the first minute and a half, he does it, right? So what we know, before we know of anything about Alton Sterling's criminality, whatever the things that he did, what we knew is that he was assassinated in the city we lived in one of the poorest areas in town. And one thing that I also remember about that is that the first rally they had for him outside the Triple S, there were literally white people outside that rally that said they did not know that area existed. Didn't know about the store. I'd never been over here, right? Which kind of speaks to a lot of things. The redlining of Baton Rouge speaks to the socioeconomic divide of Baton Rouge. And so there was a lot of things that people were learning about Baton Rouge, people who were natives, people who were transplants, in real time, that we never really even like thought of. And so, you know, everything that happened for me, I guess, in the aftermath of that was something of a response to that. You know what I mean? And I'm not, and when I say what happened to me, either the PTSD I think that I incurred from that moment, or accolades I may have received in response to that moment. Like all this shit like tied into that. You know what I mean? A year later, the Baton Rouge Business Report gives me a 40 under 40 under award for like working and writing and advocacy and all that. But that's a response to like some conflict I had with a council person. You know what I mean? Uh, 2 years later, the Kennedy Center awards me a fellowship, but that's a response to when I'm like submitting my materials. They're like, oh, so you were really outside in 2016 when all this shit was going on in your hometown. You know what I mean? So you seem like someone that embodies these ideals of citizen artists. But again, like I said, all this stuff, whether you're talking about, you know, recognition or trauma, is all tied into it. You know what I mean? Like there were definitely points where I would be riding around Baton Rouge with like my eyes watering that summer. Didn't know what the fuck was gonna happen next. And then on top of that, you know what I mean, that happened. A week later, you know, we go with our young people to Brave New Voices, the international poetry competition. One of our youth poets, Kaya Smith, does a poem talking about what was happening at home. And then a week later, Kaya mysteriously passes away, right? And then 3 weeks after that, 1,000-year flood hits Baton Rouge. But before that time, the police are, you know, the 5 cops are killed by Gavin Long. So you got this kind of like this deep swirl of trauma and shit happening and a lot of pivoting, right? So by the time, you know, the police were killed, the narrative is pivoted. By the time the flood happens, it's like none of this other shit ever took place. You know what I mean? So it was just it was
So
a wild time.
what exactly pushed you to use your pen or your Facebook fingers? You know what I'm saying? To write poetry, to make these eloquent Facebook posts and observations. What pushed you to, like, you know, we came together, we organized people first, and we was already doing black men talk, and we
Talk,
kind of did
yeah.
away with black men talk. It kind of politicized it and made it about
Yeah,
organizing, in which we
right,
was able to do the
right.
what do we call it? The artist for Alton, in which
Artist for Alton, yeah.
yeah, in which we raised thousands of dollars for the children out to Sterling. Like, what pushed you? What
Right.
was it that was in you that pushed you to use your voice and like your you know, I hate to say use a platform, but like, yeah, just use, like, what
I
pushed you to
mean,
actually
yeah,
go
it's
in
what
that
it was, right?
direction?
I mean, I don't know. I felt like there was nothing else that I could do at that time. You know what I mean? Like for me, you know, as someone that deals with um like autoimmune illness or whatever, I wasn't able to be out in the streets like physically as other people. You know what I mean? Um, I was, you know, at that point like a year and a half, 2 years diagnosed with multiple sclerosis or whatever. So I was learning to manage, you know, just the physicality of my body. So whereas, you know, a lot of my peers were like out mobilizing every day, what I was able to do was put messaging to what we were doing. And the thing was, you know, because at the time people were like, "Oh man, you like the Baton Rouge baller," and all they're just saying all kind of shit like that. Which I'm like, you
I
know,
think Tony King was the first person to say that.
I'm like, you know, that's flattering, but also like James Baldwin, fucking James Baldwin. But what I learned in that moment, and I think what was very humbling for me or transparent for me at that time was like in a moment of movement and in a moment of mobilization, we all got roles to play. You know what I mean? Some people are gonna be out here leading the chant. Some people are gonna be out here drawing the signs. Some people are gonna be out here packing lunches. Some people are gonna be mobilizing people to vote. Some people are going to be leading prayer circles. Some people are gonna be writing, right? And so for me, it was a matter of learning, okay, in this moment, this is your responsibility. People are reading what you're saying, they're communicating what you're saying. And it wasn't all just a matter of here are my thoughts. Also, it was a mixture of here's some information, right? Here's, you know, where the next um rally is going to be, or here is where the next town hall meeting is going to be. So I just started using my platform as this kind of multitude of things or whatever. Um, I did it because I felt like it was something I needed to do. You know what I mean? It was, I think for me, it was a matter of, it was cathartic. You know what I mean? I needed to be processing what I was seeing. And that was my best way to do so. And just kind of throughout the time, like Facebook, you know, I have a kind of strained relationship with Facebook at this point now because I definitely have gotten victimized by the algorithm and whatnot. You know what I mean? Like my shit does not move around anymore, and whatever. Because especially as they shifted to a more pay to play model, right? But at that time, like I had posts that were literally being shared by like 400 and 500 people, damn near per post. because people were just like, he has a finger on the pulse of what's happening like right now. And then I was also able to contextualize it in a larger way, right? So yeah, I was talking about what's going on in Baton Rouge, but I'm like, yo, y'all also know we see that 48 hours prior after Alton, Brother Philando is gunned down in Minneapolis. Like this shit is interconnected, right? So I'm drawing these parallels, and people are like, okay, this dude, you know, has something to say, or he's putting it in a way, whatever degree of nuance that we need to like check into. So I was doing what I thought that I could do and what I thought I needed to do.
It's weird, man, because being a career conscious artist, like I've rap about this shit forever. And it's like it's so like 2016 is so bittersweet for me because like, you know, I'm about to release this album that I've been working on for 8 years. I finally get a release date. Alden Sterling gets lynched what 17 days before it happens. And I'm being called into leadership because people know me as a person who's always worked with young people, organizing with young people, you know, having this particular level of politics that I kind of use my voice for on and off the microphone. And now it's like, what we're gonna do, Marcel. I remember it got real for me with T Dubbo and Ted Poe was like, Black, tell me what to do. I'm like, shit. Like, what you know what I mean? And so it's like it was very similar. Like when I started out to put Cry Freedom out, it was Jasiri X, it was Brother William Muhammad from the Mosque 46 Nation of Islam in New Orleans, and it was Miss Vita. I remember going to work. I went to a meeting at the mosque in Baton Rouge off on Plank, and I don't know. I went just to go hear what they was talking about, and I saw Miss Vita, and I went up to her. I said, "I want to help. How can I help the kids?" And I got a number, and we started texting and talking on the phone. I remember like uh, I was as a mental health counselor. I was riding out to Gonzalez, and I remember her praying for me. She prayed for me.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? Because you know whatever. And so it really hit me. It's like, so then Cry Freedom drops. And I remember we had my this one really was well, one of the real times. So before it drops, it might have been a week before, it might have been 2 weeks before the album dropped and 2 weeks before the album release party. We had that listening party at the studio,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm listening to the song Cry Freedom, and I'm thinking about the sirens, I'm thinking about the protests, and I'm thinking about it, and I just broke down crying, listening to my music, because it didn't sound like that song was at that point was probably like 4 or 5 years old. It just not getting released, and it was the perfect song. Unfortunately, for what was living at that time, and people say that like, I had sold a lot of Cry Freedom shirts. You wore the Cry Freedom shirt to a march, and next thing I know, I look online, and everybody got a Cry Freedom shirt at the march. Like that song in particular is low key like the soundtrack of the album. If you was blacking outside, like you know what I'm saying, it maybe just within our circle, we want to call it, but like the album Cry Freedom is always gonna be something special to me. And like that's what got me. I feel like the moment the rollout for Cry Freedom and like the way I kind of stepped up and was a voice, my music wasn't about Out the Sterling, but it was about Out the Sterling. The whole album wasn't about Out the Sterling, but it was about what we was going through, was crying for freedom. Um the energy around that is when I had a lot of people looking at me. Plus, it was I had bigger features on the album as well. But I feel like that's what just how you said the writing stuff you did got you to the Kennedy Fellowships, whatever. I feel like that was a part of me getting on the Double XL thing. Some of these bigger
Yeah.
platforms that wasn't previously covering, like, okay, this dude, he's a career conscious hip hop artist. When the Out the Sterling thing happened, his music was what it was, whatever. But yeah,
Yeah. No.
2007,
No. Yeah.
seriously,
There's
that
certain.
that was that was a that was a that was a motherfucker, boy. That was
No.
intense, man.
There's certain touch points and milestones through your career, through where I mean things take off, and and a lot of times it's in response to tragedy. And
Facts.
it kind of goes back to something you mentioned earlier or whatever. We are in a time frame of such extremism, like people traffic in like tragedy and negativity and violence, and like that shit is appealing to people, right? And unfortunately, you could be doing something for a long period of time, but once you respond to something that's so extreme, folks are like, let me pay attention to what this person is saying, right? Because
I have a lot of people who told me I ain't gonna say his name, is one of my partners. I never understood what you were saying until this happened.
right,
And other people say he been saying this. That's what he been on.
because because you know if it's someone from Baton Rouge that said this, and I'm pretty sure I even know who said this, right? Again, it is a matter of context, right? So we could have seen people, black folks being gunned down by the state for years leading up to, right? We could have known all this was happening, but it hit different when you can say Fairfield Avenue, I passed that street. Triple S, oh, I know what that is.
North Foster.
You know what I mean? Um, or even if you're talking about certain spots of the protest, like down by Goodwood, when it was him and kids up. Like shit, I pass it all the time. So the context is different, and then you respond to it different.
Facts. Um, man, we can do a whole episode of this right here. Moving forward, all right. So I just I feel it'll be a great context to get into this next piece of what we're talking about. The
Mm-hmm.
intersection between hip hop and entertainers and politics. So the
Mm-hmm.
so the title of this podcast is Black Visibility is Not Black Power. It's a
Uh-huh.
quote that comes from Stokely Carmichael, also known as later known as Kwame Ture, and it was a
Mm-hmm.
response to it was him and Willie Ricks, aka Mukasa Dada. They were the ones when they were part of SNCC to first say Black Power. Um, uh, Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, he defined what Black Power was. Richard Nixon, the person who invents the war on drugs, remixes Black Power and makes it about Black entrepreneurship, Black economics, Black capitalism. And that's absolutely the era that we're in right now. So, my question to you is uh, what's your opinion on the Black elite or Black entertainers or celebrities being seen as leaders of the Black community?
Ooh, it's a loaded one. Um,
Oh yeah, we getting to the nitty gritty. Well, I got you on here.
I mean, I think first and foremost, you cannot unpack that without unpacking our relationship to capitalism. You know what I mean? Uh, the pursuit of the bag. Um, what does proximity to wealth look like with respect to how America views you? Now, what we know is that no black person can ever be wealthy enough to not be a nigger in the United States of America. If you don't know that, you should know that because it's facts. Oprah Winfrey at one point a few years ago was followed in a store. Oprah fucking Winfrey was followed in a store. This was less than 10 years ago. Everyone knows that Oprah Winfrey is a damn multi-billionaire and one of the most recognized media figures on planet Earth. She was followed in a store. This is less than 10 years ago. So, again, no amount of wealth unniggers you in the eyes of a white supremacist culture. So let's just start there, right? Um, there's this idea that the more you acquire, the more you gain, the more notoriety you get, the higher your visibility, the more that you're going to be able to get this fictitious seat at the table, that you'll be able to be respected or revered in a different way. Um, but that comes in tiers, and I don't mean TEAR, I mean TI. It comes in tiers, right? So when I think about someone like I'll use Beyonce for example. When I think about someone like Beyonce, I know for a fact that Beyonce does not have the same problems as a lot of poor or middle class or working class white women. So I don't compare how Beyonce is treated to poor or middle class, working class white women. I compare how Beyonce may be treated to Taylor Swift, right? You know what I mean? So whatever uh, industry bias or whatever systemic racism or whatever someone like Beyonce may incur, no, it's not going to be on the same level as Kathy or goddamn Karen down the street from you. You got to look at it, you got to put it in the same tier as someone that may be of the same level. So saying that to say, like, this whole concept of millionaires or billionaires being the moral authority is bullshit. It means that they were able to finesse a certain pocket of society. So they were able to finesse the financial gain, be it through entertainment, be it through, business, be it through however they got to. They were able to finesse that. That does not mean that they have the most astute ideas on politics or the most astute ideas on culture or the most, I don't know, conscious or culturally adept people. That means that they were able to finesse one aspect of American society, which is how to get money. You know what I mean? When you understand that, then you understand that that doesn't make anyone with wealth and authority on just everything. But because we are so, as a larger culture of people, because we are so, depraved socioeconomically, we're like, if I can get to this bag, I can get to respect. I can get to freedom. I can get to treated equally, equity, right? And yeah, that it never really pans out that way. You know what I'm saying? You get disrespected in a different type of way, but that doesn't mean that disrespect goes. And so, with that being the case, I'm not going to say just because someone was able to acquire a lot of wealth that they have all the answers. In fact, it is often said that you don't get to a billionaire status without being unethical or immoral. That there's a lot of people under you that had to suffer for you to become a billionaire. You know what I mean? Or even a multi-million.
Jared Ball always says there's no way you can be wealthy, famous, and politically radical.
Right. Well, yeah, because that is not the way capitalism is structured.
If you think about it, these white folks don't kill rich niggas. They only kill like we talk about assassination. The people got them. They only kill poor people who have the charisma and some semblance of power to organize and empower other poor people to overthrow the system. I think the richest, the
Yeah,
richest, the richest nigga on some radical shit they ever killed was Tupac.
yeah,
And people look at me crazy. I read his FBI files, Jack. He had to go. And like he was absolutely a
yeah,
Pan-African socialist. Like he didn't get a chance to lay it out because he was killed so young. But he said as much as he possibly could under the restraints of his record label, who was literally one of the first people to invest in private prisons.
yeah. But
But Pac
even
had an influence. Pac had an influence that no other rapper since has had over people who like he was supposed to be Malcolm X. He was supposed to be,
yeah,
and the government knew that. You
yeah.
know what I'm saying?
But yeah, and even with that being the case, like Tupac was not the richest black man in hip hop at the point that he died.
He wasn't.
So like,
He wasn't.
they the labels and the music industry definitely awarded him based on his talent, and they fed into the controversy. You know what I mean? Particularly in this goddamn fabricated East Coast West Coast beef, right? Um, and then he started to get into movies, so his capital was rising in that direction. But yeah, I mean, even at that point, he wasn't the richest black man in rap music. You
If
know
you
what I
think
mean?
if you think about it, all and this is what I try to stress to people, specifically the kids that I work with as well. All of the major changes for black folks and people of color have come from working class people organized together. Ain't no rich niggas ever really changed nothing. Like they said,
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah,
and they, saying Martin Luther King gave all this money. He was socialist. He gave all this money away, but the
yeah,
changes came because he organized young people to do these different protests. Poor people, young people.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like ain't
Mm-hmm,
no billionaires ever changed shit. So look, I'm gonna read this. Because I thought about this. I wrote this
mm-hmm,
earlier. One of my
mm-hmm,
several black thoughts. I said, there's not an amount of money that the black elite can donate that can change the material conditions of those sufferings in the colony of African America, especially if the money that makes them wealthy is contingent on the relationship with the white ruling class. If there's a dollar amount, ask yourself, why hasn't it happened? We need political power, the ability to define a phenomenon, and the ability to protect its outcome, not charity. Political education, grassroots organizing, community control, redistribution of the knowledge, wealth, and resources created by labor back in the hands of the laborers. And then the last thing I said, the talented 10th Negroes ain't coming back to give us free, as they are now the 10 percenters.
mm-hmm.
The talented 10th Negroes that Du Bois talked about are now the 10 percenters that the 5 percenters told us about. So, with
Mm-hmm.
that said, uh, more and more we're seeing rappers and others from the hip hop generation go further right politically. Why do you
Mm-hmm.
think that is?
Well, I think that for one, they believe that there is a bag to be gained by aligning themselves with, you know, right wing propaganda. I think the other thing is that a lot of folks have believed, whether they were able to articulate it at the time or not, a lot of folks, a lot of rich black folks believe in a theory of trickle down economics. Like they're like, well, if I get mine, then I can, rise the tide beneath me, and then everyone else can ultimately like get on board and get theirs. When in reality, what a lot of times happens is that once you break a certain ceiling by way of wealth and acclaim, the fight is to keep that shit. You know what I mean? And the way that most people fight to keep that shit is by doing things that align with whiteness or that align with white supremacist culture, right? We talk a lot about, Kanye West because Kanye West is for the most part low hanging fruit. You know what I mean? He is an extreme, right? But what we sometimes forget about, and this happens a lot in the culture of hip hop, because when somebody drops a dope verse or when somebody drops a dope project or whatever, our thoughts kind of sway from other shit, right? Kanye is low hanging fruit, but I still remember Jay-Z when he aligned with Roger Goodell in the NFL, right?
Call
I,
Hove.
right. I still remember this whole idea of we're past kneeling in the midst of, slightly after Colin Kaepernick's collusion settlement had happened or whatever, but in the midst of like people still being on the fence about how they felt about supporting the NFL and still actively protesting the NFL. And him being like, yo, we're past that. We're going to inspire change. And then the first measure of inspire change was to connect with an organization that cut young brother dreadlocks off. You know what I mean? Like, we forget about it. Like, we have selective amnesia when it comes to that, or we have selective amnesia when it comes to, Lil Wayne syruped up on an interview being like, I don't give a fuck about Black Lives Matter. My bitches matter to me, right? And standing next to Donald Trump or 50 Cent, you know what I mean? Because Ye Ye is consistently in that level of extreme. But we forget a lot of times that a lot of rappers, particularly those in the, let's just say, top 10% earners or talented 10th of rap, do a lot of conservative nigga shit all the time.
Before we get to Ye, because that's why I want to take us next. I'm gonna show you this. So you remember 2020, Ice Cube was making all these tweets that some were seeing anti-Semitic, right?
Right.
And this is
Yes.
also around the time where he has this Jesus Christ.
Black
What's the
agenda.
name? You know what I'm talking. I can't remember what it's called.
It was like the agenda, black agenda. Or,
It was called something. Whatever it is, and he's trying to meet with Trump and blah 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 blah
right,
blah.
right, right.
And then you have, like I said, you have Wayne, you have Lil Pump, who I don't consider him hip hop, but he's a rapper. Um,
Yeah.
Kodak Black, the baby, you
Mhm.
know, and then you mentioned Jay-Z, our beloved Hove. Let me tell you what Hove did. So, Hove wanted to get into marijuana, right?
Right, right, right.
He could not get into the marijuana business because last name is Perez. I can't remember her name. The CEO of Rock Nation is a convicted felon. She actually turned snake. So this is OG Wan's wife, right?
Right.
She actually turned state. So she was an informant, right? She turned state's witness. That's how she got out of jail. But she was still a convicted felon. So Hove made a deal with Trump not to endorse Biden, so Trump would pardon OG Wan's wife, so they can clear everybody in Rocket Nation with felonies, so they can get into get into the marijuana business.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So like I'm watching my guy, and it hurts me every so much. My guy, Killer Mike, is on this show. He's having closed door meetings with Governor Kemp in Georgia,
Right. Right.
and he's saying how good of a job that Governor Kemp is doing by doing stuff in the black community, like low-key advocating for Governor Kemp. If it ain't fuck
Mm-hmm.
Governor Kemp, it should be nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing positive. You don't have to see both sides on this shit. This man's a white supremacist, right? But like we're watching, and it's sad to see, man. It's sad to see, like, and then it's always the rappers who had social comment. Not always, but I mentioned Jay, I mentioned Cube, I mentioned Kanye, I mentioned Killer Mike. All of them had varying levels of pro-black social commentary in their raps a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Varying
Mm-hmm.
levels.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're watching them go further and further right. Now, don't get twisted. Democrats ain't worth a fuck. They terrible. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not fucking with them niggas at all. Right? They're not worth the fuck. They fumble the bag. I mean, so yes, but with that said, like dealing with some Republicans is one thing, but like dealing with some white supremacists is another. And
Right.
it's really sickening and saddening. Like I can understand the baby. I can understand even Wayne saying that shit, even though he's 40. I can understand Lil Pump saying that shit, or Kodak Black, right? I don't expect them to have that shit. But these people who had a level of political understanding at one point, at least seemingly, right? I don't think Kanye ever knew
Mm-hmm.
shit. Whatever. Since he was pretending to be a backpacker. I don't think he ever knew shit.
Right.
Whatever. Dog, you was who you was when
Right.
you got
No.
here. You know what I'm saying? But it's saddening, and then to see people who aren't rappers and see other people who came up in hip hop generation who listens to Common and Most Def, even going back to X Clan and Brand Nubian and Public Enemy up here co-signing people like this, having these meetings with these white supremacists because they're famous. And this level of celebrity worship is really killing me. I think you froze. You still there? Uh-oh. Oh, and we're back. Oh man, and we're back. Um, man, hope I didn't lose that. I think I had like a little Wi-Fi blip. I ain't no editing, so it's raw as hell. Uh,
Hmm.
so anyways, it's just sad to see uh hip hop go in that direction. This is what I wanted to show you real quick before I guess we get talking too real. Now they on cover. So remember we talked about how Ice Cube was having all these anti-Semitic tweets and blah blah blah. But then he went from making anti-Semitic tweets to uh being a guest at the Zionist Gala.
Hmm. Hmm.
The Zionists of America.
Wow.
So them is games I don't play. I'm just gonna let the people who watching and listening understand what I'm saying. Um, so yeah, I mean, so it's going further and further right is the point I'm trying to make, right? Um,
Hmm.
all right, so let's talk to it. I'm gonna ask this question. I'm gonna let you go. I'm
Hmm.
gonna let you speak. All right.
Hmm.
When Kanye dropped, I was a sophomore in college. I think I was coming into school. You was leaving school at Southern, right?
Yeah, I graduated a year before college dropout.
Contract came in 04 or 05?
Oh four.
04. Okay. So I was a sophomore in college. You just left college. But for all of us college students, he absolutely had an impact. So I'm gonna ask
Hmm.
you a three-part question. How did you first get into Kanye West and his music? When did you stop fucking with Kanye? And what the fuck is wrong with Kanye?
All right. So the first part, how did I get into Kanye? I wasn't really necessarily knowing that he was producing a lot of stuff on Rockefeller. Um, I think that I was kind of more aware of the work that Just Blaze was doing early on. But what I very much remember, my first real awareness of Kanye was prior to the college dropout coming out. And you remember MTV would have a segment "You Hear It First." Um, so they did "You Hear It First" segment on the college dropout. And I remember they did snippets of Jesus Walks, Two Words, and there was something else. And I was, man, this shit fire. You know what I mean? And so then and then he was appearing on all these different doing these guest appearances, before how they talk about our love with Brandy, Fallen with Slum Village, all these different guest appearances. I'm like, okay, sun is coming through, right? And then aesthetically, he looked like some people I knew, right? Because he was the anti-Jersey guy. He was, you know what I mean? He looked like a nigga at Pretty Wednesday on the yard, right? All that. So I remember when the College Dropout came out, and back then, me and our folk Harold Brown, we was like hanging real tough. And I remember me and Harold was at my crib, and we listened to that whole album, Cameron, Purple Haze whole album, and something else. And what I recall distinctly was at the end of Last Words, the last song on College Dropout, Kanye was like, killing y'all niggas on some lyrical shit, mayonnaise colored beans off the miracle. We were like, oh damn, you know what I mean? We were like, man, this dude here is killing, right? And I think more than anything else at that point, what I really connected to was his like working middle class sensibility. Like this idea of he reminded me something of my upbringing in the sense to where he had, these educated parents. He grew up in proximity to danger. He wasn't thugging, but he had some gangster partners. Um, but he grew up with working middle class sensibilities, right? Very much like myself. When he rapped about the cousins and the roaches in the bed on family business. I'm like, yeah, that's just like my family, right? So there was a lot of things that I connected with. And I think the probably the bigger thing, what was for me and for a lot of people at the time, he kind of combined this kind of, I guess, what we now know to be pseudo consciousness with flyness, right? So again, I saw a lot of who I was as kind of a person in him. You know what I mean? This person that, could, you know, critical thinker, creative, but at the same time wasn't super duper, backpack, super duper, conscious or whatever, could be on some fly shit. They had these working middle class sensibilities, right? He sold that shit to me and a lot of other people effectively, right? When he said that he was the Gap like Banana Republic and Old Navy, we fucking believed it. Because on one song you had Mos Def and you had goddamn Freeway, and it made sense, right? Or on Never Let You Down, you had Hove and you had it ended by J. Ivy, right? Spoken word do the work. So all this shit was like resonating with me in a different way. Um, and it was like that through the college dropout. Um, some of the features he did afterwards. I was still, with him through late registration, and I was still with him through graduation, particularly because I was not a 50 Cent fan ever at all. And so I'm like, when the whole graduation thing happened, it was Kanye versus 50, I'm like, man, I hope that he runs him out the building, right?
You remember that big debate we had at CC's Pizza with me, you, D1, and Sugar Bear about who was going to sell more? And we was, and me, you, and Sugar Bear was all team Kanye, and D1 was saying 50 was going to sell more. And this is the first time Sugar Bear
Yeah.
had ever met D1, and he argued with this man like you know what I'm saying, like you getting out loud. You don't even
Well,
know this dude like this. And we was right.
the bear
The
was,
bear was right.
the bear will never shy away from the argument. So we knew that. But yeah, shout out to my man.
Sugar Bear.
Anyway, but that was a changing of the guard, right? I think that you don't get what ultimately becomes Lupe or Kendrick or J. Cole or Drake. You don't get any of that without that moment, right? Because in that moment, the non-gangster MC, the popular non-gangster MC triumphs over what's supposed to be the gangster MC, and it changes the landscape.
Not even that, but even before that, you said Lupe. Kanye is the father to all hipster rappers.
Yeah, yeah.
Middle
So you
class,
get
the cool. So Lupe, right? But the cool kids in the hall, your Mickey Facts. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Like we not we
Charles
not
Hamilton.
the show we not backpackers, but we not street. We fly, but we not rich.
Right.
We have a
Right.
little
Yeah.
social awareness. Like Kanye ushered
Yeah.
in what was known as the breath of fresh air rap, the hipster
Right.
rapping, like because he did it. But to me, the song was Guess Who's on Third? Lupe here, like Lupe in the Third, when on that
Right.
late
Right.
registration, that
Touch
Touch
the
the Sky
sky. Yeah.
brought Lupe out,
Yeah.
and then like all the hipster rappers came out after that.
Yeah. So this was very akin to how a lot of us were living our lives at the time. I mean, if you remember the scarf era, you know what I mean, uh, going out to the club with the colorful scarf and and the metallic jacket, like this is how we were living our lives, right? And he, for a lot of people, for a lot of us, for a lot of young black males, kind of embodied something that hip hop had not been offering us in the same way, right? As far as when I had to let him go, I mean, the simple answer is in 2018 when he went to the White House. And he embracing Trump and Trump is my daddy and Dragon Energy and all this shit, right? Um, I remember after that happening, I literally went on my Apple Music and deleted him out of my catalog. Like I deleted all the music and like in a dramatic fashion, I like took a screenshot of the shit, posted it on social media, whatever. Um, So yeah, that's when it was, and that was right. That was either that was, I think that was right after or right before. I can't remember. When he went on TMZ and then got at him on the whole slavery of choice thing or whatever. So it was around that time. But leading up to that, I was, for one, I was starting to become disinterested in his music because the Kanye music that I really like was a fan of had changed a lot. I'm not talking about content wise. I mean just like the production, like
Quality.
the quality, right? The last Kanye album that I personally liked was My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, And after that, I was like, this Life of Pablo, I'm not interested in it. Shit.
See, I didn't like, I didn't like, because I was, look, Jessica broke up. Well, me and Jessica broke up when 808s Heartbreaks came out. So I used to listen to Street
Yeah.
Lights and ride from College Drive to Essen to get Whataburger and listen to Love Lockdown and Street Lights on repeat. So I fool with 808s Heartbreak. I was trying to get my woman back.
Yeah.
You feel me? Um,
Yeah, and so and so I was still listening because that was pre Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy.
right. So then you had Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy came out. From a quality aspect, a sonic aspect, I liked it. Well, I'm gonna tell you what ruined the album was he was having those good music Fridays and he released like 8 songs before it dropped. So by the time I
Yeah.
heard it, I'm like, damn, I heard these songs before. But the song that got me that I knew, okay, he's losing me, it might have been Hell of a Life, where he said, no more drugs for me, pussy and religion is all I need. I was just
Mm-hmm.
like, it was pretty vulgar. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the Yeezy taught me, bitch, you told you how to, with the Chris Rock and shit on there
Right.
like that. And I
Yeah.
was just like, this is a little different. This is the Kardashian
Right.
era. This is a little different. He had a couple records. I like the song New Slaves when it first came out. I could listen to it now. And I like the what's the name record on what was it? With the album that the rock and roll sound, the industrial rock sound shit with blood on the leaves on it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
bound to I bought the album. I didn't really care for it. I listened to New Slaves. Then I listened to recent. Oh, he been trying to tell us what he was trying to say. It sounded avant-garde at the time, but it didn't. You listen to it now, it's like it didn't age well. But I agree that his politics got worse, his music got worse. Now, the life of Pablo, I didn't like. I'm a sucker for. I'm a church boy, so I like the stuff he was doing with Kirk Franklin. I like the stuff he was doing with Chance. You know what I'm saying? Like Ultralight Beam and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I did not like Father, I Stretch My Hands to Thee
Mm-hmm.
until one night me and Mark was in a club in Houston and we was full of that liquor. Because I hated Kanye's verse on that. Talk about bleaching assholes. It's like, come on, man.
Right.
But hey man, when you full of that Hennessy in Houston, is so and then I went back, it was some joints on that album I liked. But I knew another sign shit was getting weird was when he did the interview about Famous, and he had like all these different naked people in the bed, and Trump was one of the people.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? All these topless people or whatever. And that's why I was like, okay, this shit is getting weird. And then he just started talking crazy or what have you. So I want to say that I did the last album I bought was the one with New Slaves on it, and I won't listen to that again. But the last album that I didn't buy Life of Pablo, but I heard it a lot. It has like 30 Hours was cool, Ultralight Beam was cool. It had like 4 or 5 joints I rock with or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
um, but like I like that's the thing about it, and it's sad because I think that like I don't know, people say he's this musical genius, and so I don't think he's like I have this argument, and I know I asked you about Kanye, but I got to get this off. I have this argument that says now I think Kanye is a talented producer. I think he's a visionary, but I think his greatest strength is convincing people that he's a genius. As a producer, he pretty much did the same thing everybody on the underground was doing. He just did it on the mainstream. Samples, soul samples, right? He did it on the
Mm-hmm.
mainstream. As a rapper, he's always had co-producers. As a rapper, he's never been a great rapper, and his best bars was ghostwritten or co-written. He's never been a
Mm-hmm.
great rapper, right? Um, some of the Yeezys look cool, but a lot of them look like laundry baskets. You know what I'm saying? As a designer, he's so famous he can make something ugly look cool, but they're ugly. And I
Mm-hmm.
think you describe his clothing where he's dressed as a street urchin.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? And so if we talk about from a business standpoint, you know, even his own personal dealings, if he's such a business genius, then Wacom Nike messed over him, Wacom Adidas messed over him, Wacom Gap messed over him, Wacom Louis Vuitton messed over him. You know what I'm saying? If he's such a music business genius, why he's messing over these different artists, not paying these different artists? Why can't he promote people like Side the Prince? What happened to this Big Sean's deal? And why is he having his personal deals getting fucked up with Universal? The biggest thing about Kanye West that is genius is convincing other motherfuckers he's a genius so they can look past his bullshit. That's his biggest thing, especially given the fact that he himself said that he pretended to be a backpacker. And he
Yeah,
got
that
niggas
was
like me and you. That hurt my heart just as much as almost the Trump shit. As a backpacker,
yeah,
as a
that was
backpacker, as a nigga who, well, I can't reach it, but as a nigga who had several backpacks, you know what I
yeah,
mean?
no, yeah, no, I was like,
That hurt.
I was really disturbed when dude said that. But I mean, when I watched and I wrote about this when I watched the Genius documentary, Cootie and Chike. I'm actually me and Leslie going to see Cootie and Chike has something at the Kennedy Center next week. We're going to where they're like talking about process or whatever. Anyway, but as I watched it, it really like told the story of someone who had been clamoring for acceptance and for white visibility damn near from day one. You know what I mean? We didn't see it early on, but the signs were always there. You know what I mean? Even, people talk a lot about the whole George Bush doesn't care about black people watershed moment, but shortly thereafter, like I remember when late registration came out, um, one of his primary co-producers, white guy, John Brown, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Ye just raved and raved about, and I have John Brown doing like it was like at that point, and it's only the second album in, he was talking about this avant-garde white sound in his music that was going to take it to levels that the sped up soul sample could not, right? When the truth of the matter was the people who really like became fans of his, like they were fans of the sped up soul sample. They were into the way he was chopping up, you know, Kanye had a knack for chopping up the most nuanced parts of songs to where you're like, damn, you know what I mean? That was cool, right? But even by the time late registration happened, just in his conversation, how he was talking about it, you know what I mean, and how he would eventually talk about his music later on, you could tell that he was pivoting and wanting to be deeper embraced by white folks. Now, yeah, I think that he has, mental health issues, and he's diagnosed bipolar or whatever. But I think that where his cultural psychotic break happened was with the Taylor Swift shit. And what I mean by that is when that happened, he got called a nigga so much online. He was so vilified for that moment to where I think that was a pivotal, like that was a turning point.
Obama called him a jackass.
Exactly, right? And here's something to take into consideration about that, and it's something I've always thought about. Even like his um hot and cold relationship with Hove, like you can look at that in comparison to like Hove's relationship with Obama, right? So Kanye got to a point where in his mind he felt like black folks or black culture was not embracing him the way that he wanted to be embraced. But I really think the bigger thing was he was more interested to pivoting into, the depths of white culture, and more than anything else, this idea of winning, this idea of what wins. And so, by the time Donald Trump, who was his Gemini brother, quote unquote, twin dragon energy brother, is elected president, he gets to see, oh, I can be awarded at the highest levels for being crass, for being, um, for carrying myself in an unethical and an immoral way, right? And I think that all of those things, coupled with the fact that he always was looking to embrace, looking to get white acceptance, it just kind of all snowballed into what we saw in 2018. Um, if Kanye was looking to make another pivot, like the pivot that apparently happened after Taylor Swift, our homeboy Van Lathan gave him an out. He literally could have pivoted after that moment. Because Van, and what was so, I look at that shit every now and then. What was so brilliant was that Van came at him from a fan perspective, right? And was like, this is what you're doing that has been damaging to the people who look up to you, people who admire your work. And what you're saying right now is bullshit, right? He could have taken that moment and really processed that and went somewhere else with it. But the allure of white supremacy was too strong. You know what I mean? Like, we got to remember that in that time frame when all that was happening, and he goes to the White House, he's jumping on the desk, he's referring to himself as a crazy motherfucker. Trump is grinning in his face and patting him on the back. So he's being embraced, right, by this idea of MAGA, by this idea of uh, white supremacist culture. And then he did the most Judas shit ever after that and played on black folks' tops in the name of religion. So for me, the disdain grew deeper with Sunday services because I knew the play that he was making. He had already been, you know, ostracized, pushed to the outside the margin, and the first thing he did was I'm about to, and that choir was fire. Like them motherfuckers can sing. Like I watched the color.
It hurts me. It was really frustrating because so Kurt Franklin is from Dallas, and before he blew up, he was in Ardmore performing at musicals at least 2 or 3 times a year. So like that style of bridging hip hop into gospel music is something that we grew up on. Our choirs did it, and so the church boy in me would love to go to a Sunday service.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
So he,
saying? And like,
yeah,
I'm really salty too because I did that 12 city tour and I had my album release, and that bitch Kanye had the Sunday service the same night as my album release party, and I had to pay Aaron $300 because ain't nobody come to
yeah,
my shit because everybody went to Sunday service. So fuck you,
yeah,
Kanye. But
yeah. And so so even with that, right? You had a point where he started Sunday service stuff. He gets to, he talks this kind of the save talk, right? And he's kind of forward facing with this I've been saved, I've been redeemed talk. I say forward facing because at that time, and if you go back and read any interviews or whatever, during that time, he was not denouncing Trump or Trumpism. He was not denouncing white supremacy. He wasn't doing any of that. All he was doing was front loading with this idea of I'm saved, I'm redeemed, Sunday
I don't
service,
smoke, I don't
whatever,
drink, I don't cuss, I don't watch porn anymore.
right? And all that, right? But I think even with that, and not to get too, I guess, philosophical here, but I think even with that, at the time, I'm like, what level of Christianity or what level of Jesus or whatever is Kanye trying to peddle to people? You know what I'm saying? Because when I think of Kanye in the Sunday service era and what he was alluding to, I immediately think of that famous image of a bunch of Klansmen in the church. If you know what I'm talking about, right? With like Jesus saves in the background, right? And it's a bunch of Klansmen look like in a choir state. I'm like, this is what I feel like you're peddling to folks. You know what I mean? I don't feel like that you are redeemed by uh the bronze haired, brown skinned, Middle Eastern figure. I think that you're peddling Caesar Borgia to us.
Yeah,
As Trump.
he ain't talking about Yeshua ben yourself.
Right. So, I feel like you're trying to kind of peddle this Roman Catholic, you know what I mean, uh
White supremacist.
white supremacist Christian, you know what I mean, Christian ideology, right? But because our people are so culturally tethered to, what I mean, Christianity and to Jesus as a form of salvation, when he did that, people were like, all right, well, I guess I can kind of look past, what he did with Trump. And then things took a turn, I think, for the interesting when his marriage started to dissolve with Kim Kardashian, right? Because what happened there is that
You can't blame Kardashians no more.
you can't blame Kardashians no more. But I think this was the other thing that he did. Um, he again kind of cozied up to black culture by being like, see, this white woman who I was married to is not allowing me access to my kid. Now I'm fighting for the black fathers who blah blah blah, who can't see their children or whatever. And like clockwork, black folks empathizing with him. Now, let's not get it twisted. The Kardashians are some of the most problematic people on earth, right? And they have done things that, excuse me, is not may not necessarily look like outright white supremacy, but they've definitely done shit that is trafficked in like low level races, right? And so it's easy for people. I think it was easy for folks to kind of find themselves siding with Kanye, and also like Kanye represented a lot of brothers out here. At least he was trying to position himself as such. Like I can't see my kids, right? All along, Kim is telling people, yo, this narrative that he's painting is not true. Like he literally was just with his kids the other day. Or the reason why he wasn't at Chicago's birthday is because he planned his own, right? But he's doing all this because I think that, again, he's trying to endear himself or keep himself endeared to black people, right? So then when he turns around a couple of weeks ago and his White Lives Matter and is on an interview with Tucker Carlson and all that, what he wants is exactly what he gets. And what I mean by that is if you go to any comment thread on a Kanye West article or anything about Kanye West, it is a fucking culture war. It is black people, it is a lot of black people specifically still trying to find ways to coddle him and cape for him. And it's also a lot of other black people like, we need to let him go. And so there's this constant back and forth, right? For me, it became simple 4 years ago. I wasn't listening to the music like talking about before the time, but like 4 years ago, when he did what he did in that White House, I'm like, I don't know how you come back from that aside from saying I was really, really mentally damaged at that point. I've gone through intense counseling or whatever, and so now here's where I'm at, right? But even the whole thing about the Kanye mental illness, this is a thought I had, and I want to I'll share it here. This is what I find very interesting about a lot of black folks who cape for Kanye's mental illness. There are black people who are killed by police in the midst of mental health crises, right? The same folks that Kanye basically thumbed his nose at by wearing a White Lives Matter shirt because we know what White Lives Matter is about. And so I am of the belief that some of the same black people who defend Kanye on a mental health level are also some of the same black people that's like, this person that was experiencing a crisis should have acted better in the midst of their crisis, or maybe they might not have been gunned down.
You know what's funny about that? Well, not funny, but I have this. Well, I really try so. I don't even call him Kanye on. I say Omari from Chicago, because whatever. But I haven't seen one white person defend White Lives Matter. Only black people. Like I haven't seen one white person. Now, mind you, I'm not around. My timeline is kind of red, but even white people be
Right,
like, white people be like, I'm not saying that shit.
right,
Like I haven't seen one white person who is not I'm not around. I don't have race people in my timeline. I'm not really around the motherfuckers. But
mm,
like he didn't even say all lives matter. He would have
yeah,
stepped further than the all lives matter niggas and the blue lives matter niggas and said white lives matter. And like, I haven't
yeah,
seen one person that's in the culture. I've seen nothing but black people in the culture trying to defend this, trying to say he's a free thinker, trying to say he's just being a market. I'm like, bro, if he's a genius marketer, why have to use white supremacy to market
yeah,
your stuff? You know what I'm saying? If you know what I'm saying, like if you're such a smart person and innovative, right? But like it's crazy because like he's on Tucker Carlson. I didn't watch much of it, but he talking about he likes Trump's conservative values. I'm like, what the fuck? Like and like I asked myself, like, rap music has been a tool of propaganda for the white ruling elite to use capitalism to sell whatever they're trying to sell, be it Nikes, fucking Jordans, Mercedes Benzes, prisons, big pharma, or fucking genocide, right? Like they've used rap music to sell this shit forever. So using rappers as a parrot to, black degradation, even if it's not like a political statement or whatever, a statement like Kanye's making, but just in the rap music, it's been like that for 30 fucking years, right? But when did black people, specifically niggas from the culture, start defending white supremacy? Like, and I ain't talking about white
So
supremacy as in anti-black, black on black crime that we enjoy. Because if you play fuck them other niggas, I'm gonna say I'm down for my niggas too. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if I'm in that mood, if you play whatever, like I'm going to rap this. I'm going to my favorite Jay-Z raps involve pistol play. You know what I'm
right.
saying? But when did black people from the culture start defending white supremacy politically? And that's what
I think
that's what like white supremacy like people are defending rapists and racists. And it's like and it's old, and the thing about it is like my Mexican student loves Kanye. And I said Kanye West lost his mind. He said, well, you can't say that about him. He's bipolar. I said, yeah, he's bipolar. But I started talking about the political reasons. And even he said, let me go back and listen. And he's a 14-year-old Mexican kid, right?
mhm.
Niggas is 45 years old. Who know
Well,
better? You came up
so
on like what the fuck?
I think the short answer to the question is when the face of and black anti-black when the face of anti-blackness was a black person, Kanye West became a billionaire. That's when it happened. Because again, you have to you got to see where the idea of, and I'm not saying like I know you do, like where the idea of capitalism, where the idea of chasing the elusive bag ties into this, right? So the defense for white supremacy comes from if this guy has been afforded all of these things by being this way, then shit, it can't be nothing that bad, too bad about it.
But it's crazy to hear that from niggas in their 40s, though, bro. I can get that if a teenager says that shit. You're a
Yeah,
grown
well,
ass fucking man,
yeah,
bro.
well, yeah,
Like,
well, again, so I think that, but when you look at it from this perspective, like if you're a grown person or whatever, and you have been going through the rat race of the job market, going through the rat race of, trying to get ahead of capitalism, trying not to be check to check, trying to be, have your savings, trying to have your earnings, trying to have, your stock and your equity, all this shit. You're like, damn, I have been moving along my life all this time, disassociating from white supremacist ideals, and look what it has gotten. You know what I mean? Whereas this person is embracing it, and look what it has gotten him. Now, to me, that's a poor ass excuse to be co-signing the shit he's talking about. But what I'm saying, and what I think I've been saying, from the beginning, is that our pursuit of material gains, or our desire to be, 1%, our desire to be at the top rung of capitalism often pushes our people in dangerous directions. So what you're seeing right now is folks in the industry, folks in the culture responding to, like, I was, I was looking at the clips that Nori and them were posting, Drink Champs were posting for this upcoming Kanye episode. I actually like responded to one on their page or whatever, um, because I was frustrated. I made my own post on Instagram, which basically was like, Nori does not have the intellectual depth to, to 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 do what he's trying to do. He's trying to he ain't got that. Like he really should stay away from that. But more than anything, Nori and EFN and all the creative drink champs know that you put this Negro on, this is automatic viewership. This is automatic ratings, right? And the thing that is probably the most bothersome for me at this point is that Black folks who are in the culture, who are tastemakers, who are whatever, they claim that they are trying to reach out to their brother, but what they really are doing is capitalizing on his manic nature and not cutting his water off. If you really don't want him to push white supremacist anti-black propaganda, cut his fucking water off. You don't cut his water off by giving him platform.
Puff went on Breakfast Club and gave a semi-light condemnation of Kanye. Kanye clapped back. They exchanged tweets and texts or what have you. And then you turn around and let him on your platform.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Like,
Like,
if Diddy wanted to stifle Kanye's voice in this moment, he could call Nori right now. He could have called Nori right then and said, "Yo, do not put this nigga on Drink Champs again. I have the power to. I don't give a shit. I have the power to shut y'all situation down because you're on my channel. You're on my platform. Don't put him on here anymore." But that's not the play. You know what I mean? That is not the play.
and you see what Brian was like, nah. Brian said,
Yeah,
hey, we talked to him and he promised he wasn't gonna talk about this type of shit. He got here, started talking this bullshit. We got into it. We not doing that shit.
yeah, but you know,
I
yeah,
honestly I wouldn't have had him on there in the first place.
that's what
But
I'm about to say. So
at least they was responsible enough
I
to
think
not air that shit.
I think it was noble to not air it, but also I'm like, Bron, let's keep it 100. The person that you brought on here, he didn't just start talking this shit. You know what I mean? So maybe you tried to make an agreement with him that he wouldn't do it, but what I'm saying is that from the point that Kanye got to talking about, you know, what our ancestors went through was, you know, and all the fucking ridiculous things he said over the last 5 years, Black folks, if they were culture bearers, quote unquote, if they were concerned with the danger of his rhetoric, they would disassociate. But the reason why they have not disassociated is literally since that time, Kanye has gotten richer. Like he's gained more material wealth since that time. And so, what does that mean? That means that if I give you a platform, if I associate with you, then I can stand in proximity to wealth. Let's not get it fucked up. Nori or whomever, anyone that's giving Kanye a platform understands that with that comes ratings. With ratings comes deeper endorsements or sponsorships. So all of that again ties back to material gain.
And so my partner hit me up. He was like, Marcel explained that to me. Kanye says all this cool shit, but when he says something that might be anti-Semitic, now what's the problem? He said, I don't get it. I said, let me explain it to you. Jewish people protect their legacy, Black people don't.
Mm-hmm.
Like there can't be the equivalent to a Black mainstream hip hop industry with Jewish people, in which Jewish people are talking about killing each other, Jewish people. It's not gonna happen. Joe Rogan, with how many was it, like 70, 80 times he said nigga on this show? He's not gonna make one Jewish slur. Bill Maher, another white folks niggas like, said nigga
Mm-hmm.
on this show.
Mm-hmm.
My boy Killer Mike caping for him.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's so whatever you feel about the ADL, if they reach too much, they don't play about their legacy. They'll let nobody disrespect them. Meanwhile, like I said, if I go out in Omaha and they play fuck them other niggas, I myself is gonna put middle fingers up and maybe in my mind say a couple of niggas who I don't like. You know what I mean? So like black degradation is embedded into our culture, unfortunately. And I'm not even I'm not even mad at a culture that protects their legacy.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like they protect their legacy. You can say
and
if reach
well,
too
yeah,
much, if they say anything is anything, but hey, they protect their legacy. And so
yeah, that
now
and
he's speaking out against a super duper protected class to where we're so desensitized to black people being disrespected. You know what I'm saying? It's nothing. We accept it. But there's people who don't accept it now they're on this fucking top. And that's what you
yeah,
get, motherfucker. That's what you asked for.
yeah. And black culture is such an open door. You know what I mean? Um, we um, we always talk about this fictional cookout and who gets to come. You know what I mean? And you know what I'm saying? So we operate so much as an open door culturally to where folks there there is minimal consequence, if any, to disrespecting black people. Like it's just not, you know what I mean? So there are certain situations where a person may lose their job or possibly lose their livelihood if they are just like violently racist and that comes to the forefront. But by and large, and particularly in a culture in hip hop culture, where as you often talk about degradation nihilism is like at the forefront, there are no limits to disrespecting black people. Like there are none. And so, because of that, anyone else can come in, say what they want, act how they want. But yeah, you know, whether you're talking about Jewish culture, hell, whether you're talking Asian American or Asian culture, like there are certain human beings culturally where you cannot cross that line. If you do, there will be consequences. We, unfortunately, and particularly in hip hop, we don't have it. Like the fucking fact that a Takashi 6 9 was able to flourish is the exact example of that, right? There is no goddamn universe in which Daniel, whatever his name is, Takashi 6 9 should have been able to flourish talking the way he talks, acting the way he acts, moving the way he moves. But in black hip hop culture, the door is so open. And so for me, I think what that ultimately comes back to is why is the door so open? You know, when rap music and when hip hop culture became super duper commodified, you know what I mean? Shit changed. You know what I'm saying? And that's over 30 years ago, right? Um, we stopped we stopped gatekeeping the integrity of hip hop culture a long time ago. And we traded that shit in for endorsements, and we traded that shit in for, now you get to be in a movie, or we traded it in for a lot of things, right? And so when you are when you are in high pursuit of the top levels of capitalism in a free market, free enterprise, society, then you're gonna take whatever shit comes with it because the bag is the bigger priority, right? And so, whether you're talking about Kanye or whomever else, like what you are seeing is black folks who have prioritized economic gain over everything else. And the lie that they've told themselves is that they're doing it for the betterment of our culture. You know what I mean? What did Jay-Z say on 444? What's better than one billionaire? Two? But for who? You know what I mean?
Bro, I live
For
in Tulsa, dog. I live in a place to where black capitalism is our identity. It hasn't worked.
right.
It didn't work. Like, and I
Yeah.
don't even want to get into all of that, whatever. But I'm in a place. Imagine being a socialist, surrounded by like staunch black capitalists. So, um, yeah,
Yeah.
this
Well,
shit doesn't
yeah,
work. Like,
and I think that, in that situation, and that, and I know that is by and large a response to history of folks being like wanting to get back what they felt was lost 101 years ago or whatever. But uh it's the whole thing about rappers moving more to the right and conservative, first and foremost, it takes a lot as you age to not move in more conservative directions just in your ideology, right? Um, Most young people tend to be more liberal in their ideals, right? Life often makes people more conservative as time goes on because experiences and shit like that. Not talking politically, but just like how you move, right? But with respect to how rappers are moving more to the right, they are trying to secure bags that, I mean, rap ain't got no goddamn, like, they trying to work on like a rapper's pension right now, but rap ain't got there's no security blanket with rap or in hip hop.
I guess what trips me out is like, I mean, in general, I think our parents and maybe the people that's a little bit older than us, right? Let's say people zero's age, right? Like
Hmm.
black folks, because we worship white Jesus, black folks are naturally conservative, but
Yes,
but but
socially.
but socially conservative, but they knew that these a lot of these Republicans are redneck cracker racists, and so they didn't vote Republican, right?
Correct.
If Republicans weren't so fucking overtly racist, then more black people would be Republicans, and I get it.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
but to hear black folks condone racism just was crazy to me. Like, you know
Yeah,
what I'm
no,
saying? Like
that
the fact that white supremacy and racism is no longer a deal breaker.
yeah, no, it's a different level because again, at least the way I view it, they're looking at it as if Kanye is the Trojan horse, if he's the ultimate prize of what selling your soul to white supremacy can look like, they're like, well, I mean, he is a billionaire. You know what I mean? And so that's where the pursuit of that bag makes everything go out the window. Um, he 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 could be more responsible, but one, that man is living in a world completely foreign from the rest of us. And I think another thing that a lot of black folks have a hard time grappling with is like the guy that you see right now is not the guy that you related to. He's not that. You know what I mean? People talk about this dude like he's a family member of theirs. He's so far from who you think that he is. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, just that whole idea of, we need to save our brother. Man, let him be who he wants to be. You know what I mean? Let him frolic the way he wants to frolic. That ain't gotta be a cultural concern of any of ours.
I really hope that Kanye is able to live a long life because he's crashing
Yeah, yeah.
and burning. Like, I hope he doesn't kill himself. Hope he doesn't have an overdose because he's going in a very he's going in a direction in which people don't live long.
Right.
I hope he gets the help that he needs, or I hope he just goes away. But I hope he's able to live and die of natural causes when he's in his 90s. Because, like, the way he's going, like, a sudden death is, I'm not wishing this upon him at all. But
Yeah.
like this is that serious crash and burn,
Yeah.
like the helicopter's coming down
No,
right
I
now.
mean, yeah, it's either that or he could potentially harm someone else. You know what I mean? Like his interactions with Kim Kardashian actually give me very OJ vibes. And they have been for a minute, right? And that's not to, OJ was, exonerated of that crime, whatever, whatever. But he yeah, he it would be great if he's able to move beyond this period in his life. But you're right, like there is the signs are there, and I think that what concerns me about that is that if he dies suddenly, then the narrative that's told about him could be completely off base. And I think that's important. I think that we need to, we learn, later in our adult lives, or maybe early in our adult lives, the narrative that we were told about Martin Luther King in elementary school and middle school was not accurate. You know what I mean? These things are important. Like the way we remember people in history is important, right? Because it informs very much how we move in the present and how we move in the future. And so, if if Kanye gets to die as a misunderstood genius, or, early in life, or not, he's 45 or whatever, then you don't get the opportunity of seeing someone potentially evolve beyond the point that they're at and be able to tell a different story. Because right now, like I would hate to see the online commentary about a dead Kanye at this point, and I would hate to see the permission it would give a lot of people. You know what I mean? To
You
be,
talk about culture wars. Oh my God.
yeah. I mean,
You know what I'm saying? Like the people saying, you have some extremists saying, "I'm glad this nigga's dead" or whatever. Ooh, it's gonna get
right,
crazy.
right,
It's gonna
right,
be violence behind this shit, bro.
right. And so like for me, again, I'm cool with him being out in the pasture wherever he got to go. Like I divorced myself of my fandom, and so I'm comfortable with that, right? Um, I don't want to see anything happen to him. Like I don't want to see anything happen to pretty much any human, right? But with respect to where he is in his life, that shit has absolutely no bearing on mine whatsoever. You know what I mean? So you go do what you need to do. The only thing, and I responded to something on Instagram earlier, because I made a comment on a post pretty much saying how it was important um to combat some of the shit that he says. And somebody replied to me and was like, how do we do that, or why do we do that? Kanye is beyond saving. And I was like, to me, countering Kanye's points is not about saving Kanye at all. Kanye is 45 years old and a billionaire. He may fucking think the way he's thinking for the rest of his life and his afterlife. What this shit is about is stopping other younger black people from buying into the shit he's saying. Because as you said earlier, we have had sellouts, we have had Sambos, we have had step infections, whatever you want to call it, but very rarely have had black people that propagate white supremacy on that level. That shit is rare. He's existing in rare air. And so you do have to cut that off. You do
I
have to.
No, I'm saying I said that when the interview we talked about Kanye with me and Irvin from the Redland about 2 or 3 years ago. And I said he's the top three most treasonous niggas of all time. And he not three. Like, I honestly can't think of any person that I know of, and I'm a history major, right? I can't think of any person I could think of that sold, that baited and switched and sold black culture out and black people out like Kanye.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, I can't. At least I can't. Like
Yeah.
like William O'Neill and them niggas who informed the, what I'm saying, about Fred Hampton, but like they wasn't billionaires. Like and
Right.
niggas that
Right.
niggas that
Yeah.
the niggas ain't love William O'Neill, right?
Correct.
Niggas, and that's the reason why I heard so much with Kanye, because we loved him. We went to
Yeah.
school with this nigga. We was in the union with this nigga. We might
Yeah.
have we might have let him use our car to get some lunch. You know what I
Right.
mean? After
Right.
calf, you feel me?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he came to our kickbacks. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? We
Yeah.
performed with this nigga at the open mics, at the
Mm-hmm.
poetry. We know Kanye, and that's why it
Yep.
hurts so much the way he betrayed us. Like that's what for me.
That
That,
that
that's
is
that's
that is also why people hold on
can't let
so
him go. That's why
long.
I can't let him go.
They hold on so much to this idea of him coming back around. And I'm like, the person y'all saw on Deaf Poetry doing, you know what I mean,
And the
what he
white man
did
get
there,
paid off of all of that. That dude.
like, let that go. If he chooses to come back to that, let him come back to that. But let that leave your mind because that person has left the building. Um, may not come back to the building. You know what I mean? And my thing is this, and I'll kind of I don't really have much else to say about him outside of this. You know, when people talk about this whole idea of mental health and what happened to him after Donda passed and all that or whatever. I said this a while back. I was like, I was 20 years old when my mother passed. I had no real money. I was in college. I had no resources. You know what I'm saying? My dad was there or whatever. I had family, but I didn't have access to things that could have really deeply helped me through that trauma and that grief. When Kanye West's mother died, he was already a global superstar. He had millions of dollars. He had access to probably any level of mental health counseling, emotional counseling he wanted. He opted not to take any of that. So, you know what I mean? For one, I hate that narrative of people pinning his behavior on his mother. Watching Genius, I kind of get a little bit more perspective of what Donda was in his life. She more or less provided cover for him because I think that she knew that there were things that were disturbed about him from early on, right? I don't think that, some of this kind of mental illness or mental instability, if you will, is brand new. I think that Donda knew that and she provided cover. So there's a tragedy there that there's no one to provide that cover at this point. But bro, you have access to every goddamn thing in the world. If you wanted to better yourself, you could. You're playing off of your mania, you're playing off of your, you know, instability, and you're playing in people's face. You're playing in the face of a whole fucking culture. You know what I mean? You're playing on people's emotions and what they felt about your music and how they connected with you. You're playing with all of it. So if a motherfucker cuts you off, so be it. You don't need to be on.
The clothes ugly, your music don't snap. Like it's and then it's like, I mean, he really will tear his drawers with this Jewish shit though. Like because he's going like Quali said, Quali problematic as hell too. But this man out here espousing Nazi propaganda. Like that's different. Like that's a whole different level of racism. Like that's like damn. Well, look, bro. Before you go, I'm gonna do this.
Mm-hmm.
Where did it go? Where did it go? Where did it go? Hold on one second. I just had it. Uh, uh, we didn't do a lot of time talking about what you do, but for the people who still might be watching, y'all make sure y'all go to observeblack.substack.com.
Yeah,
Can you tell the people a little bit? You see, I'm looking at the booster shit up here.
yeah.
Can you tell the people a little bit about what you've been up to lately and your newest endeavors?
Yeah, so real quickly, I started a publication online called Observations in Blackness at the end of July. I was formerly content editor for the North Star, and I got laid off. And we were working through on the North Star. We were working with the platform Substack, which is very friendly to writers and content creators. So I just went ahead and developed my situation from on Substack. So Observations in Blackness is basically me talking about things that I observe in Black culture, writing about things, from a nuanced perspective. And so, like we talked about Kanye here. I've wrote a piece about him, a bunch of things, right? Um, and I also have interviewed some people. So very recently, I interviewed a brilliant sister by the name of Dr. Outchea Blackstock, who runs an organization that deals with health equity. It's called Advancing Health Equity. So, you know, my observations of blackness, it is a subscriber based publication. You can be a free subscriber, but paid subscriptions is how I am able to, you know, basically uh, provide income in my household now. And there's a difference between free and paid subscriptions. So with paid subscriptions, uh, you have access to everything, even when it goes behind the paywall. You have access to it all. There's some things I send specifically just to paid subscribers, but I also have something for free subscribers. Uh, every week. So usually put out content about 2 to 3 times a week. Um, and yeah, it's essays, it's poetry, it's video content, it's audio content. So that's where I'm at with it. In the words of Common Lonnie Rashid Lee, writing for my life because I'm afraid of a day job, but actually writing is my day job. So that's what it is.
Incredible, bro. Anything else you want to leave with the people before we go?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier about me being 5'2"ish, but I'm actually closer to 5'5". And so I just
My
want to
bad, bro.
clarify that.
Hey, bro. Bro,
Hey,
it's been so long
hey,
since I've been under 5 feet, under 6 feet, dog.
look,
I ain't even
look.
all
When
this shit look
you
the same to me at this
No,
point.
I understand. But when you're not when you're not tall, every inch counts. So you know what I mean. So I just wanted to clarify that. But anyway,
He
that ain't
5'5" with the soul of a 6'4", nigga. I'm 6'4".
right.
You know what I'm
That
saying? He
ain't
got the
giving me no
voice of
no
a six
NBA
four nigga, you
contract
know
or
what I mean?
nothing. But whatever the case may be. But nah, I mean, yeah, yeah. I hopefully folks get to check out Observations of Blackness. I'm working very, very hard on that platform. And yeah, that's about it.
Great conversation, man. Mr. Donney Rose, like people know him for one thing, and I feel like the conversation we had, these are conversations that like people might not have heard from you before. That's why I asked you the questions I asked you because those are
Yeah,
stuff I was surprised for you to say. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
So I hope the people got out of it what I did. A lot of gems, a lot of game. Uh, MarcelPBlack.com, YouTube Marcel P Black is gonna be up. Observe Black.substack. You know what I'm saying? Tell them where to find your social media, Donnie.
I'm on Twitter at Donney Donney_Rose ROSE. Not Twitter, Instagram. That's my Instagram. Donnie_Rose. On Twitter at DRose225. I'm on Facebook, Donney Rose, poet, performance artist. I also have a page for Observations of Blackness on Facebook. Black Out Loud. I got a couple of Facebook things, but if you type in my name, DONNEYROSE, you can find some stuff. I'm on TikTok at Donney Rose Videos. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on all the damn platforms.
Nigga, Outchea. Cause we really
Yeah,
it's the Really Outchea podcast. Listen,
yeah,
if
yeah.
you're not out here, you're not gonna be on this podcast. It's for niggas that's really out here, bro. Been outside. We man, look. One day we have to talk about the non-serious shit from like 2006 to like 2011. The other stuff. We
Yeah,
could talk about the entertainment story. We talked about the serious shit today, but like, yeah, we used to get it
yeah.
in.
Got it,
We
got
used to get it in,
it.
bro.
Because there's always the story of the Boosie album release party
Mm.
that the people need to know from
You're right.
2006.
Look, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do like story times and tell wild shit. But yo, man, we out of here, bro. Love you, man. Y'all be good. Peace.
All right, they're good.